Chapter 205. Leaving Huang Village with the addition of Ming Dong, Jian Chen could no longer be considered the newest addition of the Flame Mercenaries. In the past, his strength had been insufficient, but now that he was a great Saint Master and had the assistance of the Violet and Azure Sword Spirits, even if he were to run across an Earth Saint Master, he would be able to fight them. So slowly, he was building up the strength of the Flame Mercenaries. Next, Jian Chen stayed at the Huang Village for another 2 days. In those days, he went around saying his goodbyes and prepared to leave the village. In the wooden house, Ming Dong continued to recover his strength. He looked at Jian Chen, who was leaning against the wall. "Jian Chen, when I'm fully healed, I will leave Huang Village, and if you have not returned, I will look for you." Jian Chen muttered to him, "I've used up all the herbs in my possession, so all that's left is for you to slowly heal. By my estimation, you'll fully recover in a month. For now, I'll be leaving to take care of a few personal matters. I'll be back in a month, so for now, just rest up." Taking out a space belt and 8 Class 4 monster core, along with a few purple coins. "If you heal up and I'm not back yet, then cultivate with these. With your talent and these Class 4 monster cores, your strength will shoot up quickly. If I don't come back for a long time, feel free to leave by yourself." Seeing Jian Chen hold out those 8 Class 4 monster cores, Ming Dong's face became startled. Class 4 monster cores were very costly, and so he had never used one. Just thinking about how he had almost lost his life over a Class 4 monster core had traumatized him a bit. So when Jian Chen had brought out so many Class 4 monster cores for him to cultivate with, he felt that he couldn't comprehend such generosity. Taking a deep breath and calming the raging emotions in his heart, his hand shook as it reached out to grab the items offered to him. With a complex look, he said, "Words of thanks won't suffice here, but in short, I, Ming Dong, will remember your kindness." Ming Dong was a person who remembered his dues. Jian Chen had saved his life and then gifted him so many precious items, so in Ming Dong's heart, he had resolved to follow Jian Chen with determination. He knew that were it not for Jian Chen, he would not have been able to see the afternoon sun ever again. Plus, Jian Chen was already a great Saint Master at such a young age, that spoke plenty about his cultivation talent. To follow such a person would be no loss at all. After planning things out with Ming Dong, Jian Chen didn't stay in Huang Village and immediately left the village he had stayed in for the past few months. Huang Village was very far from any other place and had mountains surrounding it, meaning there were very few people about. Following the instructions of Roscoe and the village elder, he headed out in a certain direction out of the mountain ranges. As time went on, Jian Chen had come across a multitude of villages like Huang Village. In these mountains, there were plenty of them. While walking, Jian Chen committed the path back to Huang Village to memory. He didn't want the path to be lost to him, since he wanted to meet back with Ming Dong after he finished with his personal matters. To find such a small village within the continent would be extremely difficult. So in the case that he would forget the path, he tried his best to remember every detail. There weren't any wild beasts in the mountain range, and magical beasts were rare as well. With that, Jian Chen could stroll through the mountain ranges for a day without seeing more than 2 Class 1 magical beasts. This mountain range was exceptionally large, and Jian Chen didn't know if he was still within the Blue Wind Kingdom after falling off the cliff and into the river. Jian Chen continued to walk until the sky grew dark, where he stopped by an open plain. In the night, the cliff of a nearby mountain hung overhead while the moon's light scattered down and illuminated the area. Walking just a little farther, he met a group of mercenaries within the cover of the night. There was an encampment of 20 tents with a small campfire lighting up the sky in the middle of it. Slowly walking toward the group of mercenaries until he was within 100 meters of them, Jian Chen didn't bother to conceal his footsteps, so the sounds of his walking and the rustling of the grass had instantly alerted the mercenaries. "Who's there?" A voice called out loudly and woke the sleeping mercenaries. Immediately, the previously calm campground went into an uproar as a large group of men came charging out and surrounded Jian Chen. Because the moonlight was right behind Jian Chen, they could only make out his figure, but upon seeing only a single person, everyone's face loosened up a bit. "Who are you? State your name." A mercenary called out to Jian Chen. Jian Chen stopped just 20 meters away from the group of mercenaries that surrounded him. This one is only a mere traveler who has lost his way. Perhaps you could spare a map? The mercenaries all looked at him with a strange face of surprise before another mercenary spoke to him. Where are you coming from and where are you heading to? Jian Chen hesitated for a moment before replying. Before I ask my question, could you possibly tell me, is this still the Blue Wind Kingdom? The group of mercenaries were now looking at Jian Chen with an absolute look of shock. Correct, this is the Blue Wind Kingdom. A built mercenary responded. Upon hearing that he was still in the Blue Wind Kingdom, Jian Chen had a look of excitement on his face. That's good. This one, looking for the Class 3 Wake City. If anyone here has the directions, this one will be very grateful. What? You're going to Wake City? A person asked in surprise. Like the others, he was staring at Jian Chen with a strange look. Seeing the expression on everyone's face, Jian Chen was suspicious. Is there a problem? There's no problem. As it is, we're heading to Wake City as well. We didn't think that we'd meet someone else headed in the same direction. A person laughed. Since all of us are heading to Wake City, you should come with us. There's still a decent ways until Wake City, and the road is still dangerous. One more person is one more person to rely on after all. The sturdy-looking man laughed with a friendly expression. The captain's right. There's still a long road until we reach Wake City. If you go by yourself, it'll be quite dangerous, so it's best to go with us. A 40-year-old man spoke to Jian Chen. Jian Chen hesitated for a small moment before nodding his head. That's fine then. If everyone doesn't mind, then I'll share the road with you. It's quite fortunate that I've met you. I'm not familiar with these roads, so I would have been lost. Chapter 206. Loyal Spirit Mercenaries. After that, Jian Chen continued to travel with the mercenary group and chatted with them. Jian Chen and the group of mercenaries subconsciously grew closer together, while at the same time Jian Chen had learned a thing or two about the group. This group of mercenaries was called the Loyal Spirit Mercenaries, and it had around 80 members. Aside from the captain that had peak Saint Master strength and 5 others that were Saint Master experts, everyone else ranged from Saint to Great Saint. As the night came, Jian Chen and the Loyal Spirit Mercenaries would often talk for a while before retiring, but Jian Chen would always take out his tent from his space belt and then 2 monster cores in order to spend the rest of the night cultivating. As usual, the energy within the monster cores was absorbed into Jian Chen's body at an alarming rate. However, the only difference this time was that the moment it entered Jian Chen's body, it automatically rushed toward the violet and azure sword spirits within his dantian without a single speck going toward Jian Chen's own body for refinement. Right now both sword spirits were especially weak. Their strength wasn't anywhere close to its peak, so Jian Chen didn't rush trying to improve his own strength. Instead, he chose to pass all of the energy he absorbed to the violet and azure sword spirits in order to help them recover. Since he could borrow the power of the sword spirits, he wanted to strengthen their power first so that the power he could use would be even stronger. Now that Jian Chen was a great Saint Master, he wasn't in such a frantic rush to improve his strength again. Although the berserk elements within the monster core's energy were quickly absorbed by the sword spirits, just randomly cultivating would only lead to a shaky foundation and affect his strength. The violet and azure sword spirits had taken the energy at a fast rate, even faster than Jian Chen's original absorption rate. A single Class 4 monster core would be completely assimilated into the sword spirits in 2 hours. Taking in a deep breath, Jian Chen was surprised by just how fast the sword spirits were absorbing the energy from within the monster cores. He didn't know just how much it would take for the sword spirits to recover, but the speed they were taking the energy had triumphed over his. With a Class 4 monster core completely gone within 2 hours, Jian Chen could only be shocked at this speed. After all, a Class 4 monster core was not like a Class 3 monster core. If it took 2 hours to fully absorb a Class 3 monster core, then Jian Chen would take the results begrudgingly. But for a Class 4 monster core? Jian Chen couldn't afford to have that kind of result. Despite the fact that he could kill a Class 4 magical beast without a problem, they weren't as abundant in numbers as Class 3 or Class 2 magical beast. AI. It takes 2 hours to absorb a Class 4 monster core, and with 24 hours in a day, that means 12 Class 4 monster cores could be fully absorbed. What an extravagant waste. Jian Chen sighed as he furrowed his eyebrows together. The night was very peaceful in the campground, but occasionally there was an odd sound. By morning, the sun dyed the lands a bright red as the loyal spirit mercenaries packed up their tents while chattering. Soon afterward, the campfire came to life with a crackling sound. In his tent, Jian Chen slowly opened his eyes and shook himself sober from his cultivational meditation. Walking out of his tent, Jian Chen's eyes swept around. Seeing only 40 men moving about and lighting campfires while packing up the tents, he noticed a few were already mounting the horses in preparation to move out. From some other tents, a few men slowly crawled out in a hazy stupor. A few of them were yawning continuously, a symbol of their lack of good sleep. Slowly shaking his head, Jian Chen began to pack up his tent. "Hey, Jian Chen, did you get a good night's sleep?" Suddenly, a deep voice called out to him from behind. At the voice, Jian Chen turned his head behind only to see a sturdy-looking man coming toward him. This man was someone Jian Chen recognized. He was the leader of the loyal spirit mercenaries, Hudolf. Quite well, yes." Jian Chen responded with a laugh, though last night, he hadn't slept a wink. To be accurate, Jian Chen hadn't ever slept frequently since he was young. The moment he had become a saint, he started to sleep less and generally spent the nights cultivating. Sleep was nothing more than a waste of daylight. Although sleep was necessary to recover, when a person sleeps, their head becomes blank. Within this world of spirits and dreams, a person wouldn't be able to sense the passage of time, but the common man would waste this time by sleeping. A cultivator could enter a state of meditation and recover his spirit there. Through this method, not only would the spirit recover, but it would also improve faster than sleep would. Sleep was merely a way to recover spirit. The stronger experts of the world would be able to go day and night without sleeping. After an early breakfast, the loyal spirit mercenaries immediately set off for the road. Jian Chen didn't have a mount to ride on, but instead rode within a crowded caravan on the way toward Wake City. In a flash, Jian Chen had traveled with the loyal spirit mercenaries for an entire day. In that time, Jian Chen had idly chatted and deepened his friendship with them all. At this moment, Jian Chen sat within the crowded caravan with his eyes shut before slowly opening them. Staring outward with a cold glare, he spoke out, "Be careful everyone, there's movement up front. It should be a magical beast." Hearing Jian Chen's warning, the group paused as each one of them stared up ahead. However, no matter how much they strained their eyes, they could only see an empty plain in front of them with no strange object. "Jian Chen, you're too sensitive. Everything's normal with nothing moving at all." A mercenary called back with a grumble. "Yeah, Jian Chen, this type of talk shouldn't be said so casually. If you can't make sure of this in the future, then it's best to not joke about it." Hudolf reprimanded. Suddenly, just as Hudolf finished speaking, the land around them began to shake. "Captain, there's actually movement. Pay attention to the ground." A mercenary cried out the moment he realized the ground was shaking. "The earth is shaking. Could a group of mercenaries on mounts be passing by? Are we being attacked by a group of magical beasts?" As they spoke, each one of the loyal spirit mercenaries began to pay attention to the shaking of the ground with serious expressions on their faces. "Everyone prepare yourself for an attack." Hudolf cried out without hesitation toward his group of mercenaries. Each one of the loyal spirit mercenaries suddenly sprung into motion as they brought out their saint weapons. They arranged themselves into a serious battle formation as if ready to fight a war. Chapter 207. Conflict with a giant beast. As the tremors in the ground became more apparent, everyone grew more and more serious as they tried to find out what exactly was causing the tremors. All the loyal spirit mercenaries clenched their weapons as they stared ahead. They heard many sounds coming from in front of them, but they still couldn't see anything. Each one of the mercenaries knew that if what Jian Chen had said about a single magical beast was true, then this one was indeed a strong magical beast. "Everyone be careful. If we can't fight, then prepare to scatter." Hudolf barked in a serious tone. Just then, a man with an expensive robe and a weak-looking face came up from behind and moved next to Hudolf. "Captain Hudolf, what's happening? I just heard something about a magical beast heading our way. Is that true?" "Sire Hari, you should move back for now. We're not sure if it's safe yet, but based on the movements in front of us, it's either a group of mercenaries on mounts, or a large amount of magical beasts. And it's not just one magical beast. Hudolf's voice was calm, but his expression was extremely serious. Can the goods be saved? The weak-looking man asked. That's difficult to say. Hudolf shook his head. Sire Hari, you should prepare to run for now. In the case that there's a large group of travelers, then it won't be that bad. But if it's a single magical beast, then Sire Hari, you should know the result. AI, hearing Hudolf's words, the man could only sigh heavily. Those goods were his, and the loyal spirit mercenaries was the group he had hired to protect him until Wake City approached. If the goods they were transporting were lost, then he would not be able to make up for the deficit, since this entire inventory of goods had been completely bought using the man's savings. Jian Chen sat cross-legged within the caravan with his eyes concentrated in the direction ahead. However, compared to the others, he was much calmer. There wasn't a single trace of panic to be seen in his eyes. At this moment, a small dust cloud could be seen from beyond the horizon. The dust cloud wasn't moving too fast, but as the dust cloud moved up and down, the mercenary group could feel the tremors in the ground get stronger. These shakes continued to spread further and further within a large perimeter of several kilometers. By this point, everyone could finally see that the reason behind the dust cloud and tremors was indeed a magical beast. Everyone's faces grew whiter by a few shades. If it was a group of people that was causing the shakes, then they would have been able to make way for the group to pass, or even give some money for a safe passage. But with a magical beast, there weren't any other options aside from fight or flight. The large magical beast right in front of them appeared to be a large gorilla that was 10 meters in height with brown fur. It stood up on two legs like a human, and walked similarly to a human as well. Step by step, it bounded towards them. That's a war beast. Seeing the large humanoid magical beast, Hudolf's face became priceless, and the furrow of his brows loosened significantly as well. A war beast, as the name implied, existed to fight. Not only were their physical defenses terrifyingly strong, but their strength was unparalleled and could overthrow city walls. These types of magical beasts were known as the children of the earth, the pets of Mother Earth, or natural controllers of the earth. A single footstep of these war beasts could cause tremors within 100 kilometers. If it was a strong war beast or a group of them, then they could bring down a Class 1 city's walls with their footsteps from a distance of 10 kilometers away. Despite this, a warbeast's single-target attack was pathetically weak, and they had an even greater weakness in speed. There weren't many warbeasts within the Tianyuan continent, but they weren't extremely rare either. Practically every country had a few warbeasts under their command. Captain, that's a warbeast. Its defense is strong, but its offense is relatively weak. What should we do? Should we fight it and force it away? A loyal spirit mercenary asked. No wonder there was such a strong tremor. It was a war beast. Since it's a war beast, this will be easier to deal with. Hudolf laughed. Brothers, a war beast isn't much of a threat to us. Let's drive it back. All right. Immediately, a group of mercenaries jumped down from their mounts and dashed toward the large war beast. Jian Chen sat in the caravan as he estimated that there were probably only 500 meters separating them and the warbeast. His mind raced as he tried to think of any good information on warbeasts. A warbeast's strength is determined by its size. A warbeast that has reached Class 6 level will be around 100 meters tall. A Class 5 warbeast will be around 50 meters, and a Class 3 warbeast would be less than 10 meters tall. Judging from this warbeast, it's a little over 10 meters, making it a Class 4 warbeast. Jian Chen muttered. A warbeast's defenses are exceptionally strong. Even a magical crystal cannon would be unable to do damage to it. The stronger it is, the more terrifying its defenses are. It would be incredibly hard to kill one. Even the Dragon Clan during the peak of the magical beast era was said to have been unable to match with the warbeast's defenses. I'm not sure if I can penetrate through its defenses with my current strength. Ho! Seeing a group of mercenaries charge toward it like a group of small ants, the warbeast let out a roar before stomping heavily on the ground. Bang! As an oppressive roar rang out, the ground around the war beast began to fiercely shake. A series of web-like cracks ran through the ground in all directions. Soon, the area within the large perimeter was covered in cracks. The violent shaking of the ground had caused the caravans to sway violently. The force was so great that even Jianchen wasn't able to control himself and fell to the ground. Creak. The caravans began to creak with a painful sound as the various commodities tumbled to the ground. Not too long after, dozens of caravans all collapsed. This kind of earthquake didn't affect the loyal spirit mercenaries at all. The group quickly arrived at the warbeast's feet and resolutely hacked at the warbeast's body with their saint force-filled saint weapons. However, they didn't damage the giant warbeast at all. Even its fur had remained completely uncut. Ho! The large warbeast snarled angrily. It lifted one of its large legs into the air before firmly slamming it down towards a mercenary's head. That mercenary lazily rolled away and dodged the warbeast's foot. When the warbeast strongly slammed its foot into the ground with a seeming endless amount of force, the entire area shook violently once more. But what amazed everyone was the fact that when the warbeast lifted its leg, there was not a single trace of a crater to be seen from the blow. Chapter 208. He Fearful Violet and Azure Sword Chi. The defenses of a warbeast are quite strong. Everyone put more strength into your attacks, combine them. Hudolf cried out as his saint weapon materialized in his right hand. With an explosive shout, a large amount of saint force surged into his weapon as he slashed down onto the warbeast. Just as Hudolf used his entire strength on that one strike, it didn't have any effect. The warbeast's skin remained undamaged like before and not even a single strand of hair was cut. Damn it all! Hudolf couldn't help but curse out loud. Why is this warbeast so strong defensively? It's just standing there for me to kill, but I can't kill it. Captain, this warbeast is just too strong in terms of defense. We're not strong enough to harm its defenses, so what should we do, run away? A mercenary shouted to Hudolf. Captain, this warbeast is a Class 4 magical beast. Even if a great Saint Master can damage it, we surely cannot with our strength. It'd be for the best if we retreat. A gray-robed middle-aged man spoke to Hudolf from his side. That's right, Captain. We don't have any way of beating this warbeast. Hearing his mercenaries' opinions, Hudolf didn't hesitate. Immediately barking out a command, he shouted, "Brothers, head toward the caravans. I'll hold the warbeast off." Yes. Immediately a dozen men ran back toward the caravans at the back of the group. The moment they saw the caravans, each one of them became thunderstruck. Each one of the caravans had been broken apart from the shockwaves, making it impossible to run away. Crap, what do we do now? With so many goods, I won't be able to store them all in all the space belts. The mercenaries all felt a bit awkward as Hari began to panic and fluster about with concern. Bang! Bang! At that moment, the earth shook violently once more as the warbeast charged forward with heavy footsteps. Carrying with it an imposing air that had destroyed the caravans, its feet continued to harass the loyal spirit mercenaries underneath it without any concerns. Crap, it's coming! Sire Hari, you should store the most important items into your space belt first. With so many things, it's impossible to save them all. Seeing the warbeast come trampling over, one of the mercenaries shouted nervously to the weak-looking man behind them. But these items are all precious. This is practically my life savings. If I give them up, I will take disastrous losses. Plus, my space belt isn't even that big to begin with, so I won't be able to carry much. Hari cried out bitterly as he looked at the 10 broken caravans with a broken heart. No one needs to panic. This warbeast here, leave it to me and I'll stall it. Just as Hari and a few other mercenaries were panicking, a calm voice suddenly rang out. Every person close by turned their heads to look at the owner of the voice only to see Jian Qin, who hadn't bothered to participate in this battle until now. The mercenaries and Hari's face had a skeptical look to it as they watched the 20-year-old Jian Qin walk forward. They clearly didn't believe the words he was speaking, and so a mercenary couldn't help but say, "What did you say, Jian Qin? You're going to stall the warbeast?" Jian Qin, this warbeast is unbelievably tough in terms of defenses. Not only that, but it's also a Class 4 magical beast. Unless we have an Earth Saint Master here with us, then it'll be impossible to fight this. Even a great Saint Master will be unable to pierce through the defenses of this war beast. An experienced mercenary explained to Jianchen. He doubted Jianchen due to his age and because of how strong the war beast was. As everyone called Jianchen's strength into question, he only laughed without explaining himself. Walking forward, his body suddenly flew like a bullet toward the war beast 100 meters away. Jianchen's speed was exceedingly fast. In the blink of an eye, he appeared right in front of the war beast, and the light wind sword instantly materialized in his right hand. With a sharp amount of sword chi transforming the glow around the blade, Jianchen thrust it in between the eyebrows of the war beast. Even as the light wind sword made contact with the space between war beast, it was prevented from going any further. Jianchen's eyes narrowed for a moment as he felt the large amount of resistance against his sword. For a moment, Jianchen had began to doubt that this was a war beast and was instead an incomparably defensive essence. Ho! The war beast let out an angry snarl as both of its eyeballs stared at Jianchen with a bloodthirsty glare and threw a hand at him. Turning his body in the air, he flew down to avoid the paw and landed gracefully on the ground. His eyes hardened as he looked at the gorilla-type war beast. What a strong defense, to somehow surpass my expectations by so much. No wonder the legends say that even magical crystal cannons aren't able to injure it. However, his initial sword strike had left the faintest of traces upon further observation despite not landing a substantial blow on the war beast. Although he didn't use his entire strength, Jianchen knew that even with it, there was no guarantee that he would be able to split open the warbeast's defenses. A warbeast's defenses were legendary within the Tianyuan continent, and rumors had it that humans and magical beasts within the same level as the warbeast would be utterly incapable of damaging it. Even if a human were to use an extremely strong battle skill, it would perhaps be able to create a small amount of damage. The moment a warbeast reached the level of a Class 4 warbeast, its defenses would also increase, and even Earth Saint Masters would have a hard time killing it. Bang! 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 The warbeast followed Jianchen with his eyes as each footstep it made shook the ground. Walking toward Jianchen, it could feel the slight pain still from Jianchen's sword. Jianchen, hurry up and run. The warbeast is about to charge at you. Hudolf cried out. However, Jianchen turned a deaf ear to Hudolf's warning, and with a sharp gaze that was filled with energy, he looked at the approaching warbeast. Jianchen's light wind sword suddenly burst into a violet and azure glow. Ho! The warbeast was right in front of Jianchen now. With another roar, it lifted a leg to stomp on Jianchen. Jianchen dodged the following step by moving to the side. Then jumped in between the warbeast's eyebrows. The light wind sword stabbed forward like a flash of lightning. This time, the moment the sharp light wind sword made contact with the eyebrows of the warbeast, it was almost as if the defenses no longer existed. The light wind sword easily stabbed through the warbeast's defenses straight into its skull. The warbeast's defense was like a piece of tofu in comparison to the light wind sword. The moment Jianchen stabbed it with his light wind sword, he felt no resistance at all. Ayo! The warbeast let out a miserable cry that reverberated through the air. Slowly, the howls of pain receded as the giant body slowly crashed to the ground. Jianchen pulled out his light wind sword from the skull of the warbeast as a few bloody drops fell to the ground. Bang! The warbeast's gigantic body smashed against the ground, shaking the ground twice, sending a ton of dust flying up into the air. Chapter 209. Return to Wake City. Seeing the downed warbeast, every single loyal spirit mercenary's face instantly grew lifeless. At this moment, every single movement had stopped, as if everyone had frozen. Their eyes were stuck on the warbeast, whose head was bleeding profusely with looks of extreme disbelief. The Class 4 warbeast in front of them had a defense stronger than what any one of them could imagine. Even a great Saint Master would be hard-pressed to damage a warbeast, and an Earth Saint Master with a battle skill would still need to use an astounding amount of effort to kill it. To see this unbelievably tenacious warbeast killed by a youth not even over the age of 20, everyone was incredibly shocked. No one had expected this type of power from a person they picked up on the way to Wake City. At that moment, Every loyal spirit mercenary realized that this low-profile man traveling with them was actually a high-leveled expert. Jian Chen didn't take notice of the shock of the loyal spirit mercenaries. At this moment, his mind was reeling from shock. He was surprised to learn that the violet and azure-colored sword spirit's power would be so strong. Despite his foreknowledge of it, Jian Chen still couldn't help but be shocked by the extent of the power. By Jian Chen's approximations, the defenses of the war beast would be incredibly difficult for him to make even a substantial amount of damage. If he really wanted to injure the war beast, he would need at least the strength of an Earth Saint Master, and yet with the power of the sword spirits, the war beast's defenses were like tofu. They allowed for the light wind sword to pierce through the skull without the slightest bit of resistance. Now was also the time that Jian Chen understood how terrifying the violet and azure sword spirits were. Although the sword chi was an extension of the sword spirits who were in a very weakened state, their power was still overwhelming. With this, Jian Chen realized that he had the fighting strength of an Earth Saint Master. The war beast is dead, oh heavens! A war beast was killed, and this war beast was even at the Class 4 level in strength. Everyone had already returned to where the caravans were. One by one they expressed their feelings as everyone looked at Jian Chen with expressions of shock while a few others had expressions of worship. The loyal spirit mercenaries leader, Hudolf, let out a breath of air as he examined the ground where the dead war beast lay. With a slight shake of his head he looked at Jian Chen, who was close by. After a moment of hesitation he walked over to him. Jian Chen, I didn't think you'd be an expert of such profound strength. AI. It is truly inconceivable that with your current age you are able to kill a war beast of this level. However, I as the representative of every member of the loyal spirit mercenaries must give you my thanks. You have solved a major problem for us. Hudolf spoke honestly and respectfully. Jian Chen's excitement began to decrease back to a normal level before smiling. This was no effort at all, so the captain needs not be so polite. Besides, we are sharing the road. If one of us comes across a problem, then it is natural that I provide assistance. Jian Chen and Hudolf began to talk among themselves politely for a while before the other mercenaries busied themselves with other matters. The loyal spirit mercenaries were split into two groups. One was responsible for repairing the caravans and loading up the goods, and the other group was responsible for dealing with the war beast's body. The body of a war beast was something the loyal spirit mercenaries wanted to sell, but because the body was far too strong and extremely heavy, they wouldn't be able to move it. So they could only bitterly bite their tongues and abandon it after Jian Chen extracted the monster core from within it. In a flash the caravans were repaired, everyone resumed their travel to Wake City once more. Now, Jian Chen was sitting at the front of the very best caravan they had to offer, where the owner of the goods, Hari, sat with a friendly smile. Suddenly a thought flashed through Hudolf's head. Turning to Jian Chen, he asked, Jian Chen, seeing how young you are, you've only just started to travel within the Tianyuan continent, correct? Jian Chen nodded his head. Yes, I've only been traveling for 2 or 3 years now. Then would you consider joining our loyal spirit mercenaries? While we aren't extremely strong, every member here is very close. We're a tightly knit group. After traveling the Tianyuan continent for many years, our experience is quite abundant. Plus, if you travel with us, you will be familiarized with the continent quickly and learn of the many dangers. Even the strongest of mercenaries will lose out on many things if they are not experienced with the continent. Hudolf spoke with an anxious look of anticipation as he tried to rope Jian Chen into his group. Giving an apologetic smile, Jian Chen replied, "This one thanks Captain Hudolf for his offer, but I've already joined a mercenary group." What a great shame then," Hudolf said disappointedly. He then looked at Jian Chen once more and spoke again. "For a mercenary group to have a person like you, then that must mean that mercenary group is quite strong." Jian Chen shook his head with a bitter smile. "Right now, aside from me, there is only one other person in it. I am the captain." Hudolf looked at Jian Chen with astonishment, but no words came out from his mouth. The man was thinking about something inside his head. Afterward, the group continued to travel toward Wake City slowly. On the road, Jian Chen's position within the loyal spirit mercenaries had took a drastic change. Everyone was very respectful to him to the point of far surpassing that of their Captain Hudolf. Even Captain Hudolf himself had taken on a warm and affectionate tone with him. The road was relatively peaceful after that. Another 3 days went by before the caravan finally reached the territory of Wake City. At this, Jian Chen could already make out the magical Beast Mountain range 20 kilometers from Wake City. In front of them, the tall city walls of Wake City greeted everyone's eyes. Even after 1 year had passed, the city walls hadn't changed at all. The only difference was that the amount of soldiers on top of the city walls had multiplied. Even the amount of guards at the gates had reached a larger number than Jian Chen had remembered. Seeing the familiar walls once more in a state like he had remembered, Jian Chen couldn't help but remember when the Tianxiong clan had chased him out of the city and forced him to make a miserable escape. Tianxiong clan. I, Jian Chen, have returned. Chapter 210. A timely meeting in the restaurant. The caravan entered the city without any problems. Jian Chen and the loyal spirit mercenaries bid each other farewell and set about their own paths. Seeing Jian Chen walk farther and farther away, Hudolf had a look of hesitation on his face as he sat on his mount. His head lowered in thought before biting his lips as if he had reached a conclusion before turning to look at this group of mercenaries. Brothers, after all of the goods are delivered properly, do not leave yet. There is one more matter I wish to talk to everyone about. Yes, Captain. The loyal spirit mercenaries all cried out in agreement. Although each one of them had some sort of question on their mind, not a single one of them said it out loud. Jian Chen walked through the large streets, but unlike last time, Jian Chen felt that the atmosphere in the city was heavier, as if some big event was about to happen soon. He then walked into a restaurant where people bustled about their business and the sweet aroma of food wafted into his nose. Smelling the unique fragrance of meat and vegetables, Jian Chen couldn't help but stop and admire the smell for a brief moment before continuing in. While he resided within the Huang village, Jian Chen had spent many days with a simple meal and tea and hadn't been able to eat any delicacies that only a city restaurant could offer. At the beckoning of a waitress, Jian Chen sat at a table so he could have a meal to eat. There was a window located by the table. Right now the day was already noon, so the restaurant was full of people. A group of sturdy-looking people sat near him and talked loudly over their meals. Do you know when this next magical beast wave will happen or how long it'll last? The city lord made an announcement. The wave should occur within a few days' time. But according to the last wave, this wave might last for over 10 days. The sounds of chatter reached Jian Chen's ears. The interesting tidbits he heard caused his ears to vibrate in interest. In thought, Jian Chen muttered to himself, a wave of magical beasts. Could it be that the magical beasts from the magical Beast Mountain range are coming to besiege the city? If so, then it's no wonder that the atmosphere in the city is so tense. With that, Jian Chen continued to eat his meal while listening in on the men talking to each other. With each bite of food he made, he digested the information he heard. Hey look, isn't that the Zhou mercenaries? One voice in particular stood out to Jian Chen, and the moment the words registered in his head, Jian Chen immediately froze in place as he was reaching out with his chopsticks to pick up a slice of meat. Slowly raising his head, he looked out the door of the restaurant only to see a group of 4 armored mercenaries with an impressive design walk into the building. These 4 mercenaries had the same exact armor with an identical emblem imprinted on their armor. Aside from the helmets, these mercenaries looked to be the same exact ones like the ones Jian Chen had met at the magical Beast Mountain range. The 4 Zhou mercenaries walked to a table near Jian Chen and sat down. After ordering a meal, the 4 began to talk quietly among themselves. Following the entrance of the 4 Zhou mercenaries, the topics in the restaurant began to divert to be about the Zhou mercenaries. I've heard the Zhou mercenary Captain Zhou Yun made a breakthrough into the Great Saint Master level 3 months ago. With a Great Saint Master, the Zhou mercenaries are surely much stronger than before. Right now within Wake City, the Zhou mercenaries are nearly unparalleled in strength. That sounds about right. Ever since Zhou Yun made a breakthrough to Great Saint Master, the strength of the entire group increased rapidly. Right now their members number over 100, and with the support of the Zhou clan, then within Wake City, the Zhou mercenaries can easily be considered one of the strongest 3. Many of the diners were chatting quietly, but each one of them were quite strong, so they could easily talk to each other without fear of angering the four mercenaries. Hearing the chatter of all the people around them, the four Zhou mercenaries sitting near Jianchen couldn't help but have arrogant looks on their faces. Within the small Wake city, a great Saint Master was considered one of the peak experts. Their statuses had skyrocketed ever since their captain made a breakthrough to become a great Saint Master, as well as gaining so many members. Zhou mercenaries, I didn't think I'd see you in Wake City. Jianchen stared coldly at the Zhou mercenaries with an intense desire to kill. Slowly putting down the chopsticks in his hand, Jianchen walked to the four Zhou mercenaries and looked straight at them before speaking slowly. You four are from the Zhou mercenaries? The four Zhou mercenaries all looked at Jianchen. From his tone and posture, the Zhou mercenaries could all tell that Jianchen was not favorable to them. In a flash, their own eyes stared coldly back at Jianchen. Correct, we are members of the Zhou mercenaries. Kitor, speak your name. A sturdy-looking mercenary said arrogantly to Jianchen. Everyone within the restaurant began to look at the interaction between the four Zhou mercenaries and Jianchen. Putting down their bowls and chopsticks, everyone tried to pay close attention to what they were saying and started to prepare themselves just in case a fight would happen. Jianchen snorted. There was a look of disdain on his face as he remained quiet. Instead, the light wind sword instantly appeared in his hand before spearing the throat of one of the Zhou mercenaries. Seeing the sword pierce their comrade's throat, the other three mercenaries were in shock for a brief moment before recovering themselves and crying out furiously. To dare go against us Zhou mercenaries, do you seek death? One roared as the other two members charged at Jianchen with their saint weapons ready to slash at Jianchen. He pulled the light wind sword out from the dead mercenary with a smooth gesture before it flashed silver once more. As the three saint weapons danced and flew at Jianchen, his sword flew out and cut through the throats of two of the mercenaries and stopped right in front of the neck of the final remaining mercenary. As the saint weapon stopped briefly in front of his neck, the last mercenary quickly recalled his own saint weapon with an extremely pale face. He didn't dare believe that a 20-year-old youth like Jianchen would be able to beat him. His strength was at the primary Saint Master level, but he was no match for a small youth like Jianchen. His eyes shook slightly as he turned his head to look at the two previously alive mercenaries by his side. His eyes could only see the small rivulet of blood pouring from their necks before their bodies fell to the ground. At this, the final mercenary's courage broke as he felt panic in his heart. Hastily, he began to cry out for forgiveness. Don't kill me, don't. Great swordsman, if there's something you want to say, say it. Just don't kill me, I'll do anything you want me to. Seeing the look of fright on the mercenary's face, Jianchen sneered, Bring me to your general headquarters for the Zhou mercenaries, otherwise, I'll kill you here and now. Chapter 211, Judgment Day for the Zhou mercenaries, 1. With a sword pointing straight at his throat, the mercenary didn't dare to try and put up a courageous face. Without hesitating to answer Jianchen's request, he took him to the headquarters of the Zhou mercenaries with a look of alarm. Jianchen and the mercenary walked out of the restaurant, but within it, the previously silent building exploded with chatter as everyone looked on with disbelief at the three dead corpses of the Zhou mercenaries. In shock, each diner started to chat to one another about the event that just happened in front of them. Who is that youth? His strength is unexpectedly high to be able to kill three Zhou mercenaries. I didn't even get to see his movements at all since they were so quick. What a truly shocking event. I am already 40 years old, but my strength hasn't even passed that of a primary Saint Master. But that youth is barely 20 years old and he killed a few men that are around my strength in a flash. How inconceivable. That youth is far too strong. I estimate that he is at the great Saint Master level. Could it be the Zhou mercenaries have offended him and he has come to take revenge today? The Zhou mercenaries' Captain Zhou Yun also has the strength of a great Saint Master. They also have multiple Saint Master experts. This youth has raised the banners of war so quickly for the Zhou mercenaries' main army, I am not sure if he will even be an opponent for them. This mysterious expert youth surely has a vendetta against the Zhou mercenaries. After that marvelous fighting ability, I wish to see their fight. Right, There'll surely be a fight in a moment. Let's hurry up and go see it. Let's go. Everyone has to go see this once-in-a-lifetime event. After that, every single person in the restaurant cried out their approval and stampeded out of the restaurant, practically leaving the place empty. Jianchen didn't bother to hold his light wind sword at the Zhou mercenary. Instead, he slowly walked behind him with a calm look as the two flowed through the streets. Although he wasn't paying much attention to the mercenary in front of him, if the mercenary wanted to run away, Jianchen's light wind sword would instantly pierce through his neck. Behind Jianchen, the group of people from the restaurant followed at a distance of 50 meters. The Zhou mercenaries were based within Wake City in a single central house. Right above the gates to the house, a single board written in fancy calligraphy had the words, Zhou mercenaries, written on it with a group of 4 heavily armored mercenaries standing right below it. Seeing the giant board on top of the gates, Jianchen couldn't help but have a gloomy yet dark smile on his face as a flash of killing intent appeared within his eyes before following the mercenary to the headquarters. This is the territory of the Zhou mercenaries. Speak your name. Just as Jianchen approached the giant gates, the guards at the gates blocked his path with a cold look and a loud shout. Umph! Jianchen snorted once more as the light wind sword appeared in his right hand. In a flash, the heavily armored mercenary had his throat pierced as blood began to spill all over the ground. The Zhou mercenary gripped at his neck with his hands as his face began to pale before ultimately his body fell to the ground. Seeing their dead comrade on the ground, the other 3 mercenaries were all shocked. They quickly regained their bearings and cried out in anger. How brazen! To kill one of our Zhou mercenaries, you are impatient for death. Immediately 2 saint weapons flew at Jianchen as the last one retreated in between the gates to report the commotion. Suddenly, just as the 2 mercenaries moved into action, Jianchen's light wind sword flashed silver and stabbed into the throats of the 2 before they could even react fast enough to register the sword. In a single moment, Jianchen had killed 3 of the 4 guards at the gate and the last one had escaped inside to warn the others. Staring coldly at the 3 dead bodies on the ground, Jianchen looked at the board overhead. Zhou mercenaries, today is the day you will be eradicated from Wake City. With that, he leaped into the air with the faint glow of his light wind sword and slashed apart the board symbolizing the Zhou mercenaries. After destroying the Zhou mercenaries' board, Jianchen immediately kicked apart the gates with a crashing noise. The wooden gates had been instantly blasted off the door hinges before landing on the ground far away from him. Bang! Just as the large gates fell to the ground, a large sound reverberated through the air along with the doors breaking into pieces and flying everywhere in a storm of splinters. Humph! Who is so audacious to go and attack our Zhou mercenaries? At the same time, a furious voice called out to Jianchen from inside. Jianchen walked forward casually step by step. He walked with a gentle approach as if he were on an evening stroll. Even his face was calm as if he wasn't taking the Zhou mercenaries seriously. As Jianchen walked into the courtyard, the figures inside the house suddenly appeared in front of Jianchen's eye. In the previously empty space in front of him, a single blue-robed middle-aged man stood there. The man looked to be around 50 years old with a few scars adorning his face. They made his appearance rather frightening. Following the entrance of this man, another group of 20 people flew into the courtyard in quick succession, a few of them running while the others flew down from the ceiling. In a short moment, there was a total of over 100 men filling up the courtyard with Jianchen in the center, surrounded. The man with the scarred face stared coldly at Jianchen as he measured him up. Kid, who are you and why are you here to fight with us Zhou mercenaries? Jianchen returned the glare as he looked around himself. Instead of answering the man, he asked his own question, is this everyone from the Zhou mercenaries? Hearing this, the middle-aged man furrowed his eyebrows. What is the meaning of your question? Jianchen let out the smallest of smiles as his right hand clenched the light wind sword. A sharp amount of sword chi filled the air around it as he whispered, from here on out, Wake City will no longer have the Zhou mercenaries. Chapter 212, Judgment Day for the Zhou mercenaries. 2. When Jianchen's calm promise reached the ears of every Zhou mercenaries, their faces all changed abruptly. In an instant, every cold glare directed at Jianchen was replaced with a furious anger and killing desire. The scarred man had a look of fury as well as his expression grew dark. A very intense amount of killing intent emanated from his eyes as he stared fiercely at Jianchen with a sneer. "Kid, with just you have no qualifications to speak of such a thing. Someone, go and seize him. Let this ignorant kid understand how high the heavens are compared to the earth. Let him know our Zhou mercenaries are not someone to fight with." As the man barked out an order, the surrounding mercenaries didn't hesitate for a moment as each one of them materialized their saint weapons and charged at Jianchen from every possible angle. Jianchen let out a sneer as his body flickered out of sight. Just as the last of his body flickered away, the saint weapons from his enemies all hit nothing but air. Jianchen rapidly moved back and forth like a bolt of lightning as he lashed out with his light wind sword. Easily stabbing mercenary after mercenary in the throat, his sword moved with a nimble grace, fast enough for the regular saints and great saints to die without knowing it. Each one of them crumpled to the ground as they were killed. Although it was Jianchen against over 100 men, the difference between the two sides was far too vast. So it had become a massacre for the Zhou mercenaries. In fact, for Jianchen, it was almost as if the Zhou mercenaries weren't even fighting back since they were utterly incapable of capturing Jianchen. Under the quick sword of Jianchen, another 2 men met a quick death. Then in the time it took for one small breath, 8 people died to his sword. The battle lasted for another 5 small breaths before the group of 100 men instantly fell down to half its original numbers. The scarred man looked on at the massacre Jianchen had made with a dazed expression. In just a matter of a few dozen seconds, Jianchen had managed to kill 50 people inconceivably quick. What frightened the scarred man was how fast and efficiently Jianchen had killed those men. Jianchen continued to flow through each opponent smoothly like water. With each movement he made, another man fell to his sword with blood flying through the air. The floor alone had begun to form a pool of mixed blood from each of Jianchen's victims. The merciless slaughter continued for a little longer as each Zhou mercenary cried out a battle cry continuously. Unsurprisingly, not a single one of them who exchanged a blow with Jianchen had cried out in pain, since Jianchen had cut apart their throats and rendered them speechless. Some of them weren't even able to feel the pain before losing their life. After another 10 breaths, Jianchen had finally come to a stop and ended the one-sided massacre. At this moment, the entire courtyard was littered with the dead bodies of the Zhou mercenaries. There had been 100 of them, but after Jianchen was done with them, all 100 of them were scattered on top of each other. Each one of the bodies had a single wound to their neck that let blood flow freely onto the ground, dyeing it a crimson red. The stench of the blood began to waft up into the air and would definitely make anyone vomit if they smelled it. By now, it was only the scarred man with a dozen other men right behind him that were left. All of them had sluggish looks on their faces as if they couldn't believe what had just transpired. There used to be 100 people. However, in a short moment, all of them were killed thoroughly by a youth that was no older than 20 years old. Even though they had personally witnessed this shocking massacre, they still couldn't believe it. The 11 people were terribly frightened where they stood without a single voice escaping from them. Jianchen stared at the remaining people with a level expression before a merciless grin slowly replaced it. The first 100 people he had killed were only those of the saint and great saint level. But these remaining people were the pillars of the Zhou mercenaries who were all at least the level of a saint master. Without sparing any time, Jianchen's figure went into motion as he flew toward the remaining dozen people. The light wind sword flew in a silver arc and effortlessly stabbed into the throats of 2 of the men, claiming the lives of 2 saint masters with ease. Now that Jianchen had made a breakthrough into the great saint master level, these saint masters were nothing more than weak ants in his eyes. Even his sword would be unavoidable to a saint master. Jianchen didn't have any intentions of letting a single Zhou mercenary escape. After killing 2 of the saint masters at lightning-fast speed, Jianchen's light wind sword once again turned into a silver-white blur, enveloping the remaining people with his sword qi. The light wind sword came down another 3 times and in an instant, 3 saint masters had their throats pierced. Up until this moment, The remaining few Saint Masters had been paralyzed. Each one of them then regained themselves with a look of abject horror and instantly moved to dodge Jianqun in a strange attempt to distract him. Stop, stop. If there's something you want to say it quickly. The scarred man cried out to Jianqun in a frantic manner as he dodged to the side. Right now his expression was no longer that of shock. Instead, horror and desperation adorned it. Jianqun stopped his massacre for a brief moment before staring at the few Saint Masters. Speak then, where's your captain? In the restaurant, Jianqun had figured out that the captain of the Zhou mercenaries was a great Saint Master expert. Within this group of people, he had realized that not a single one of them were at that level. With this situation, that could only mean that the captain was not here. That wouldn't do, since Jianqun wanted to kill the captain. The scarred man let out a deep breath as he tried to calm his nerves. Unsuccessfully, he stared at Jianqun and spoke with a trembling voice. Brother, I don't know what our Zhou mercenaries captain has done to offend you to the point that you want to eradicate us all. Compared to before, the scarred man's attitude had taken a complete turn. Jianqun's cold gaze turned even darker as he stepped toward the scarred man. Each step he took made the man even more nervous before Jianqun said, I'll ask you one last time, where is your captain? Jianqun had not bothered to pay attention to the other's question. Seeing how Jianqun was approaching him, the man took a few steps back with some hesitation. Wherever the captain is, I know not. Hearing that, Jianqun's eyes flashed coldly and cared no more for the scarred man. Instantly appearing in front of him, the light wind sword stabbed straight for the man's throat. The man's face suddenly dropped as he tried to fly backward. In an instant a sword appeared in his hand as he attempted to block the light wind sword. However, before he could even bring his sword into position, the light wind sword had already approached his neck and buried itself deeply within. The bloody tip protruded through the back of his neck. Seeing that the scarred man stood no chance against Jianqun, the remaining few Saint Masters' faces all paled in fright from the domineering power Jianqun had revealed. Run away. Find the captain. He's the only one that can avenge us. One Saint Master cried out in terror as he ran for the gates to Wake City. Right, find the captain quickly. The other Saint Masters suddenly came to their senses. Without further hesitation, they each threw each other behind in their attempts to escape from the place. Jianqun slowly pulled the bloody light wind sword from the dead scarred man. Looking at the escaping Saint Masters, he sneered before following them on their way out. Not too long after Jianqun had left, the group of people that had followed him from the restaurant suddenly appeared in a huge crowd at the Zhou mercenaries' headquarters. However, just as this group of people saw the terrifying sight that lay beyond the broken gates, all their faces grew alarmed as they couldn't believe what they were seeing. From the time it took Jianqun to enter the headquarters to when he left, hadn't even been over 10 breaths of time. In such a short amount of time, the headquarters had been littered with corpses of over 100 men. Such a sight would astound anyone. Chapter 213. Zhou Clan. Although Wake City was on the verge of being besieged by magical beasts, no one within Wake City was feeling any sort of dread or panic. The only difference was that the atmosphere in the city was a little heavy, but the citizens continued on with their business as usual. The magical Beast Mountain range was very close to Wake City, about 20 kilometers away. It towered over the Class 3 city that was highly experienced, repelling waves of magical beast attacks. Even the city walls were equivalent to walls in a Class 1 city. Every single time magical beasts attacked the city, this small Class 3 city would always stand straight and tall. So those who were born and raised in this city were all used to the besiegement of the magical beasts. Within Wake City, the city lord had announced the news as well as posted the mission within the mercenary union. Practically every single mercenary had congregated within Wake City in preparation for the magical beast's attack. Nowadays, the streets within Wake City had more people than ever. If one were to look closely, one would notice most of the people walking the streets were mercenaries who were also making most of the racket. Out of the way I said. Out of the way. At this moment, a loud and frantic voice rang through the streets, causing everyone to turn their heads. They could only see a few middle-aged men barreling through the streets desperately. Each one of them wore different colored robes, but the insignia on their chests were identical. Whoever was unfortunate enough to block their way was unceremoniously pushed aside, causing them to earn the ire and curses of everyone. Some had grown violent, and the stronger men began to bring out their saint weapons as if looking to make them pay for their crime. Look at their badges. Aren't they members of the Zhou mercenaries? They're really the Zhou mercenaries. Why are they in such a panic state? It's almost as if they're being chased by someone. When a few of the people on the streets recognized the badges on the men, they were all surprised to see this strange event. Even the men that had been pushed out of the way by them suppressed their furious wrath and saint weapons the moment they heard that the group was from the Zhou mercenaries. The captain of the Zhou mercenaries, Zhou Yun, was a great saint master. This type of matter was not a small one within Wake City. After all, Wake City was a Class 3 city. A great saint master was considered to be the apex of experts within the city. Now that the Zhou mercenaries had a great saint master within their ranks, their identity had skyrocketed to become one of the strongest groups in the city. Now, not many people would dare to offend the Zhou mercenaries. These Zhou mercenaries members ran through the streets at a fast pace until they finally disappeared within the crowd. On the road, they attracted the flabbergasted eyes of the nearby bystanders. As soon as the Zhou mercenaries disappeared within the crowd, a white light suddenly shot through the crowd and chased after the Zhou mercenaries members from behind. What's happening? Could the Zhou mercenaries have run into trouble? That can't be. Right now the Zhou mercenaries have a great saint master and also have the close support of the Zhou clan. Who could possibly be looking for trouble with the Zhou mercenaries? From this, everyone on the streets began to think up random conjecture as they shared every possibility with each other. The Zhou mercenaries continued with their mad and desperate dash for another 10 kilometers, where they finally reached a grand-looking mansion with a large 4 meters tall and 6 meters wide gate. On top of the large gate, a wide board had the words Zhou Clan written in dazzling gold words. Just from this alone, those who looked at the sign could tell that the owner of this house had a considerable amount of financial power and was quite strong physically. Let us in, we are a part of the Zhou mercenaries with important business with the captain. A Zhou mercenary member called out frantically to the guards standing right next to the gate. When the guards saw the group of people rushing at him with such frantic looks on their faces, he knew that something was happening and didn't dare to obstruct them any longer, allowing them passage inside. Within the Zhou clan's residence in a grand hall, a single 70-year-old elder sat at the first position of a table with 10 other members nearby. The elder stared at a heavily armored figure nearby. The man was sturdy and was calm before the elder laughed. "Commander Duo Li, you need not to worry about this. Our Zhou clan has towered over the rest of Wake City for 10 years. It can be said that Wake City is our hometown now. This matter of the magical beast wave will indeed have our Zhou clan ready to fight. We will give it our all to defend Wake City." The armored middle-aged man gave a small smile as he cupped his hands together. With the words of the Zhou clan's elder, this commander is relieved. With the Zhou clan added to our forces, then our victory is assured, and since Sire Zhou Yun is now a great saint master, this is truly a celebration to be joyous about. The elder's face had a gratified smile on it after hearing those words, but he spoke modestly. "Commander Duo Li gives too much praise. Zhou Yun's cultivation talent is too outstanding. We've just spent many coins on monster cores which allowed him to cultivate and break through into the great Saint Master realm smoothly." The elder then looked at another man sitting far down the table. This man wore a blue-colored robe with his hair tied up in a whip-like fashion that hung over his shoulders. His eyes had a calm yet powerful look. This man was the leader of the Zhou mercenaries, Zhou Yun. Just as the elder finished talking, a loud, frantic cry came bursting in from the hallways outside the room. "Captain, Captain! Something terrible has happened, truly a terrible matter." As soon as the voice was heard, suddenly, a man with the Zhou mercenary insignia on his chest came bursting into the room with a few other men behind him panting wildly. These men's sorrowful appearances caused everyone that noticed it to furrow their eyebrows in surprise. Some had even looked at them with an annoyed face. "Impudence! Do you not see that we are having a meeting here? Who let you in? Do you not remember our rules, our system of conduct?" Clan leader, something bad has happened. An extremely strong and terrifying man has declared revenge on us. Our 100-member strong Zhou mercenaries has been eradicated and only the ones here are left alive. The leader of the group cried out to the elder. Hearing that, everyone in the vicinity grew alarmed. What? Did you just say that you are all that are left of the Zhou mercenaries? Zhou Yun spoke with a serious face. Immediately standing up, he strode on over to the man with a loud shout. Yes, Captain. It is only us that are alive. The mercenary shouted miserably with a small tremble to his voice. No one else. Zhou Yun's eyes instantly grew dark. Everyone is dead, Captain. Another mercenary said. Hearing this, a great amount of killing intent flowed out from Zhou Yun as he growled furiously, "Who would dare?" Bang! Before Zhou Yun could finish his statement, the large gates to the Zhou clan's mansion blew open with a great sound before breaking into 4 different pieces that flew into the courtyard. Chapter 214. The Zhou clan's brave rush. This large sound stunned everyone. However, they quickly regained their bearings and their expressions grew dark. No one present was a mediocre person and had a decent sense of hearing. Just from hearing the door break into pieces, they knew that a man had done it. Impudence! The clan leader of the Zhou mercenaries slammed his hand onto the armrest of his throne, causing a large splitting sound to ring through the room. Who dares to be so audacious? To cause trouble for our Zhou clan? Everyone with me. Let us go see who dares tread on this sacred ground. The Zhou clan leader stood up with a dark expression. As he stomped out of the room toward the courtyard with a furious mood, everyone else followed. The Zhou clan leader brought the group to the entrance of the courtyard where 10 guards of the Zhou clan were already stationed. From every corner, more and more guards began to pour in and increase their numbers constantly. Move out of the way, the clan leader is here. A sharp-eyed guard cried the moment he saw the clan leader come toward them. Like water, the crowd of guards immediately made way for the clan leader to walk through. But even after that, the entire area was filled to the brim with Zhou clan guards. Surrounded by the Zhou clan guards was a single youth that was around the age of 20. The youth wore a white robe that seemed to be of an inferior material, but that did nothing to hide the characteristics of this youth. The youth was exceptionally handsome and had pale skin that emphasized his facial features. Although his expression was neutral, there was a charm in his eyes that would make any female that saw it go crazy. The moment they saw this 20-year-old youth, the Zhou clan leader's glare flashed with a cold look as he spoke out. Who are you to dare cause trouble for our Zhou clan? Do you think our Zhou clan is an easy target to bully? Jian Chen returned the leader's stare with a calm one as he spoke to the elder. And who are you? Seeing the look of disdain from Jian Chen, the frost in the Zhou clan leader's eyes intensified. This old man is the leader of the Zhou clan, Zhou Badong. Oh, so you're the leader of the Zhou clan? Jian Chen had a faint smile on his face as he cupped his hands together with a false smile. This one is called Jian Chen. I've come to find a person. As long as the Zhou clan leader brings out this person, I will leave. Zhou Badong laughed angrily. Looking for someone? Ha, brat, you need a lesson on knowing who your superiors are. To dare demand something from the leader of the Zhou clan. Brat, within Wake City, the amount of people that would dare demand something from the Zhou clan are nearly none. You are the first. Jian Chen laughed as well. It would appear that I should be happy about this. Zhou clan leader, I won't mince words with you. Do you know whether or not the leader of the Zhou mercenaries, Zhou Yun, is here? I am Zhou Yun. The moment Jian Chen spoke, Zhou Yun walked forward from the crowd with eyes that emanated a killing intent that felt as if he was a hungry wolf waiting to devour Jian Chen. I've heard you've slaughtered my Zhou mercenaries in an instant, is that true? It is. Hearing those 2 words, Zhou Yun couldn't hold himself back. His eyes flashed dangerously as the killing intent flew out at Jian Chen. Instantly, a long spear appeared within Zhou Yun's hand as he shouted, You dare destroy the mercenary group I spent 20 years creating? Youngster, it matters not who you are. I, Zhou Yun, will make you live a life worse than death and suffer from the eternal torment of the world. With this, I will take revenge for my fallen brothers. A large amount of saint force flew from his saint weapon as he stabbed at Jian Chen. Jian Chen revealed a cold smile as the light wind sword appeared in his right hand and flew out at the same time as the spear. Ding! The light wind sword carried a large amount of sword chi as it struck against Zhou Yun's spear firmly. A large sound rang out into the air as the two saint weapons made contact with each other. In every possible direction, a large shockwave spread out so dense that it could be seen by the naked eye. Along with the pulse of saint force, a large cloud of dust was kicked up and surrounded the area. At the same time, the weaker guards of the Zhou clan were forced back a few steps because of it. Sword met spear as Jian Chen and Zhou Yun were locked in a stalemate. Immediately in between the two, a white-colored glow appeared as the light wind sword suddenly shot toward Zhou Yun's throat. This sword was unbelievably fast, so much so that before Zhou Yun could react, it was already less than a foot away from his throat. Zhou Yun's face suddenly grew startled, but because of his countless years of battle experience, he remained calm under pressure and instantly kicked backward. At the same time, the long spear in his hands sprung back to him and went to block the sword. Ding! Just as Zhou Yun brought his spear in front of himself, the light wind sword slashed across the spear, transmitting a large amount of power through it. The power continued to transmit from the spear to Zhou Yun and forced him to stagger a few steps back. Although this wasn't a fatal attack, Zhou Yun's face was suddenly wet with perspiration as it went pale with shock. What a fast sword! It was so fast I was almost too slow to dodge it. Even though Zhou Yun was a great saint master, it hadn't been a long time since he made that breakthrough. He was only a primary great saint master, and compared to Jian Chen, Zhou Yun's strength was comparable to a peak saint master at most. Then, as Zhou Yun was pondering to himself and tried to stabilize his backward momentum, a white light suddenly flew at him with an even faster speed than the first one. In a split second, the light wind sword had reached the throat of Zhou Yun. This moment, Zhou Yun could only look at the sword in shock due to how fast the sword was, instantly realizing that he had no time to react. Suddenly, just as Zhou Yun resigned himself to death, a large broadsword flew out to come across Zhou Yun's body. At the same time, Zhou Yun could feel two elderly but powerful arms grab him around the shoulders and pull him away from his death. Ding! A screeching sound could be heard as the sword that was originally meant to pierce into Zhou Yun's throat stabbed against the horizontally flying sword. The owner of this sword had unexpectedly been the leader of the Zhou clan, Zhou Badong. However, the feeling that Zhou Badong was giving off felt as if he was a sword that had yet to be unsheathed. It was only after this moment that people felt that the sword was now being unveiled and was ready to strike. Looking coldly at the newly arrived Zhou Badong, Jian Chen gave a small smile. Zhou clan leader, seeing you right now, it would appear that you wish to bring the Zhou clan into this. Chapter 215. Participation of the Zhou clan. At this moment, the Zhou clan leader Zhou Budong's face was exceptionally grim. Staring at Jian Chen with a gaze that had lost the original glare of disdain, he no longer thought Jian Chen was just a youth. Now, Zhou Badong thought him to be an opponent of an equal level and didn't dare to belittle him any longer. That was because of Jian Chen's first two strikes, allowing Zhou Badong to determine Jian Chen to be very strong. If he hadn't made a move, then his son Zhou Yun would have been killed. Furthermore, when he made a move to protect his son, he had moved at the fastest speed he could muster. Jian Chen's 3 sword strikes were something that he couldn't afford to underestimate, and the third strike had caused him to act out of necessity. Secretly, Zhou Badong had felt shock within his heart. Jian Chen couldn't have been any older than 20, but for such a young man he had such a disproportionate amount of strength. Due to his accumulated amount of experience over the years, he could guess that Jian Chen had no major person backing him up. Yet, he couldn't believe that a youth with no major power behind him would be able to have the strength of a great saint master. Zhou Badong stared evenly at Jian Chen. I don't know which clan my young friend here is a part of and what grievances you have with my son Zhou Yun, but perhaps this is a misunderstanding? Whether or not this is a misunderstanding, my heart already knows the truth. The past I will not speak of, but today I will definitely kill Zhou Yun. If your Zhou clan stays out of this, then naturally nothing will happen to you, but if your Zhou clan decides to take part, then I will eradicate it as well. Jian Chen's voice was calm on the surface, but there was a hint of a domineering tone to it. Yet, as the Zhou clan heard the words of Jian Chen, their expressions grew dark and the air around them began to fill with an impressive amount of killing intent. Even as the atmosphere grew tense, Jian Chen's attitude did not change at all from his cold demeanor. Zhou Butong's face grew darker as well, but nonetheless, he stared at Jian Chen and said, "You speak far too loud, my friend. I can admit your strength is quite decent, but for you to try and eradicate the entirety of my Zhou clan? You truly think that my Zhou clan is like mud?" Zhou clan leader, it would appear that Zhou Yun is someone you are determined to protect. Jian Chen's voice gradually grew colder as his eyes flashed with a biting cold killing intent. Zhou Badong readied his own sword. "If you wish to claim my son's life, then let's see your reason why." "Wait a moment." Just as the two sides readied to fight, a loud voice called out. Looking to the source of the voice, both Jian Chen and Zhou Badong realized that it belonged to a heavily armored middle-aged man. The armored man walked forward before stopping in between Jian Chen and Zhou Badong. With a small smile to Jian Chen, he said, "Fellow brother, could your grievances with the Zhou clan be resolved with a small talk? If there is a possibility of making a big problem turn into no problem, then that would be for the best. There is no need for the two of you to fight. The magical beast wave is coming to Wake City soon, and so this is the moment where the entire city must unite as one. For the sake of unison, please talk it out. After all, this magical beast wave endangers the lives of tens of thousands of ordinary citizens. Fellow brother, please think about it for a moment." The man tried to soothe Jian Chen's fighting spirit. Jian Chen looked at the armored man with a calm gaze before asking him a simple question, "Who are you?" Despite the rude way Jian Chen had asked, the armored man was not angry. Instead, he gave a faint smile and said, "I am called Duo Li. I am the commander of Wake City's defensive soldiers and the one in charge of them." "So you are Commander Duo Li. Commander Duo Li, please step back. This is a matter between me and them and I do not wish to involve you." Jian Chen replied. Commander Duo Li let out a breath of air. "Brother, these are not peaceful times. Could you not sit down and talk this out?" Jian Chen shook his head calmly. "There is nothing to talk about, Commander Duo Li. Please step back." "Commander Duo Li, this isn't something you should get involved in. This ignorant youth wants to destroy my Zhou clan, then I will let him know the true power of my Zhou clan. Furthermore, the mercenary group my son has shed blood and tears for has been destroyed by this youth. Speak, do you truly think there is room for discussion still?" Zhou Badong spoke as he looked at Jian Chen with the urge to kill. "Arrogant child, let me test you for myself." Suddenly, Zhou Butong's figure flew toward Jian Chen with his sword bursting with Saint force ready to split open Jian Chen as it flew down toward his head. Jian Chen's gaze frosted over as his light wind sword flew out to block the sword. Seeing that the situation had blown out of control, Commander Duo Li narrowed his eyes and muttered to himself, "Wake City is on the verge of being besieged by a magical beast wave, and although this youth is very young, his strength is at the great Saint Master level. With a strength like this, it is absolutely crucial that these two sides aren't harmed. If I want to resolve the grudge between these two, I need the city lord." With that, Commander Duo Li didn't hesitate anymore and left the area headed toward the city lord's manor in a desperate rush. While he ran, Jian Chen was left within the Zhou clan's courtyard to fight against the entire Zhou clan. Zhou Badong was a great Saint Master who had reached the peak level 20 years ago. The distance left before reaching Earth's Saint Master level was merely a step. It was only because of the danger in making the breakthrough to Earth's Saint Master that caused him to stay at the Great Saint Master level. So for the past 20 years, he remained at the peak Great Saint Master level and refined his strength. The light wind sword in Jian Chen's hand danced in the air as it flew at Zhou Badong. Its movements flowed into each other, stroke by stroke, causing Zhou Badong to be shocked by Jian Chen's impeccable sword technique. He had to completely devoted himself to his fighting and used the full extent of the power of a great Saint Master. Despite that, he was still having trouble defending against Jian Chen, who seemed to be on an equal level to him. However, while Jian Chen continued to stab at Zhou Butong's sword, he had also begun to take away the lives of the Zhou clan guards one by one. Chapter 216, Great War of the Zhou Clan. The fight continued for some time as the guards from the Zhou clan gained 20 casualties. Despite that, Zhou Budong's face did not change. These guards were men that he had hired with money and had no true affiliation with the Zhou clan. So as those guards died, Zhou Budong didn't care at all and continued on. Everyone forward, whoever can injure him, I will reward them with 1,000 purple coins. If you can capture him, then I will offer 10,000 purple coins. Zhou Budong ordered. When there was a hefty reward, there would be brave people. Upon hearing the rich treasure, all the guards' eyes heated up with greed as they charged with no regard for their lives toward Jian Qin. Their saint weapons flew at him one by one in hopes of injuring him instead of capturing him. Jian Qin stared at the incoming saint weapons with a cold glare before his light wind sword exploded into action. With his sword flying about everywhere, in an instant, the light wind sword slammed against each saint weapon far too fast for anyone to see. Ding, 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 ding. Following the dense concentration of saint weapons smashing against each other, a good amount of the saint weapons suddenly broke in half. The moment the guards whose saint weapons broke, had their faces instantly turn pale as they spat out a mouthful of blood and immediately fell to the ground, signifying the death of at least 3 guards. The saint weapons shared a symbiotic relationship with their owners. The moment a saint weapon was injured, their owners would be injured as well. When the saint weapons broke under a serious situation, in the best-case scenario, the person would be unable to cultivate and be left as a cripple. In the worst case, they would die. Those who had their saint weapons snapped in half meant that their saint weapons were completely destroyed. Those who didn't die would wake up and begin their life anew as cripples. However, the allure of the heavy reward offered by Zhou Budong had poisoned the minds of the guards. Even after seeing their comrades fall, they were not frightened in the least. Instead, their ferocity had intensified now that they had less people that could possibly snatch away their prize. After all, it was 1,000 purple coins. For these normal saints and great saints, this was enough for them to live in peace and luxury for their entire lifetime. 1,000 purple coins was something they would never actually be able to earn in their lifetime. The white-robed Jian Qin continued to fly through the group of guards with his light wind sword continuing to flash with each swing. The Zhou clan guards fell to the ground one by one. In the beginning, there had been 100 guards, but after this short amount of time, only half of them remained. The Zhou clan leader Zhou Budong had already retreated away from the fight with a serious face as he observed the one-sided killing which Jian Qin gladly participated in. Clan leader, this man is unbelievably strong and his sword is too fast. It's hard for even us to follow, so these guards simply have no chance to dodge it. If things go on like this, then I'm afraid these guards will soon be completely wiped out. A middle-aged man cried out from behind Zhou Budong. Zhou Budong's eyes flashed with a cold glint as he said, with him using his sword so fast, his saint force will be used up quickly. Since just earlier he destroyed the Zhou mercenaries, there is no way for his saint force to have recovered that fast. Let him first use up his saint force on these guards. I don't believe that his saint force will still have such an endless supply after this. Zhou Lianyun, hurry up and bring the King Tiger Squad here. This time the enemy cannot be underestimated, I cannot say for certain, but the life or death of our Zhou clan is on the line. We must act accordingly with all our strength. Yes, clan leader. After being commanded, he immediately dashed to the back of the Zhou clan courtyards. After the brutal massacre of the Zhou clan guards, there was only 10 guards remaining and another 100 or so lying on the ground with their blood pouring out all over the place, staining the marble floors red. Jian Chen's body flickered as he reappeared behind the 10 guards. With the hazy glow of the light wind sword, he slashed through their necks and cleanly destroyed their ability to breathe and live. At this moment, every single guard from the Zhou clan had been completely wiped out. All that remained within the courtyard was Zhou Budong and a dozen members of the clan. Just after Jian Chen had slashed through the throats of the 10 now dead guards, an ear-whistling sound could be heard as a strong gale of wind flew at him from behind. Before the biting cold gale of wind could press against Jian Chen's shoulder, his face grew unnaturally serious before quickly turning around and bringing the light wind sword up to protect himself. Keng! A large sword suddenly fell against Jian Chen's sword, transmitting a large amount of power from sword to sword which pushed Jian Chen back a few steps. Following his backward momentum, Jian Chen's feet allowed himself to fly backward as if to get rid of the excess force driving him back. Ha! A thunderous shout exploded outward as Zhou Bedong didn't let Jian Chen have a single second to breathe before sending another sword strike at him. After that, the dozen members from the Zhou clan began to pull out their saint weapons before charging at him as well. Among the group was the relieved and recently fresh Great Saint Master Zhou Yun, the captain of the Zhou mercenaries. Jian Chen didn't bother to hesitate and brought down his light wind sword onto the sword of Zhou Bedong with an extremely large amount of sword qi. As the two saint weapons collided in midair, another strong ripple of saint force erupted from the epicenter and flew out in every direction, washing over the grass and the other Zhou clan members. A strike after, the strong amount of saint force had forced Jian Chen to retreat another 6 steps while Zhou Bedong flew back 3 steps. Before waiting for Jian Chen to stabilize himself, the dozen Zhou clan members rushed at him with powerful saint force erupting from their saint weapons ready to slash at Jian Chen. Zhou Yun himself dashed behind Jian Chen and with his long spear acting almost as if it was a serpent, striking toward him. Chapter 217. Destruction of the Zhou clan. Jian Chen's foot stomped across the ground and flew off to his side 2 meters with an ungodly speed, dodging the blows of the men waiting for him. These dozen men were fast in their own right. After missing, their hands didn't stop and immediately chased after Jian Chen. Zhou Yun's spear brought about a large amount of saint force that turned it into a white spear of lightning that flew toward Jian Chen's heart. It was a blow that Zhou Yun had put all his strength into. Jian Chen's mouth curled into a disdainful sneer. Although these dozen men looked to be incomparably ferocious, they were nothing more to Jian Chen than a small amount of pressure that wouldn't even amount to making Jian Chen take them seriously. His hand shook abruptly as the light wind sword stabbed forward with a large amount of sword qi sharpening the sword. In a split second, the light wind sword had lashed out 10 times and bashed against the saint weapons that were coming at him still. Despite the light wind sword looking like a stick in comparison to the dozen saint weapons, the tiny sword that belonged to Jian Chen contained an extraordinarily strong amount of power that the Zhou clan members could not compare to. As soon as the weapons made contact with each other, the Zhou clan members' saint weapons were forced away. The faces of the Zhou clan members suddenly went slack as they looked at the light wind sword in surprise. They hadn't thought that such a small sword would be able to contain so much power. The very moment both sides made contact, their saint weapons had actually transmitted enough force from the blow to paralyze their arms momentarily. Even as the men were in their shocked states, a white glow surrounded the light wind sword as it flew at an unbelievably fast speed before streaking across the necks of the Zhou clan members before they could even react. The dozen Zhou clan members immediately went rigid as their necks suddenly sprayed blood from their wounds. The amount of blood that poured out of their necks had then become a fountain that took away the very life that sustained their bodies. Among the group, aside from the great Saint Master Zhou Yun who had narrowly escaped death, the other dozen members had their throats slashed apart by Jian Chen's light wind sword. A single strike had killed a dozen men. Jian Chen didn't cease his actions there. With another flicker of his body, he immediately leaped at Zhou Yun to strike. Seeing Jian Chen come rushing at him, Zhou Yun immediately went pale with fright. After exchanging blows with Jian Chen once, he already understood that he wasn't an opponent that could fight Jian Chen and would be unable to survive against him for long. Zhou Yun simply wasn't a match for Jian Chen alone, and so he immediately exploded backward in an attempt to retreat. "Brat, Zhou Bedong will definitely make sure you won't leave here alive." Another shout exploded toward Jian Chen as the wrathful Zhou Bedong immediately flew in from the side in order to protect the escaping Zhou Yun. Right now, Zhou Bedong's eyes were crimson with anger. The previous dozen Zhou clan members who had died were important members of the Zhou clan and served as the backbone of it. To the Zhou clan, they were what supported the clan, and each one had the strength of a saint master at the least. Each one of them had a mind full of business and practically controlled the Zhou clan in its financial affairs. Now that the pillars of the Zhou clan had been killed, this was a disastrous loss for the Zhou clan. Jian Chen snorted. Your Zhou clan had the chance to not get involved, but you insisted so much on being a part of this. The Zhou clan are all but gone now. If you wish to kill me, you simply have no chance now." With that, Jian Chen didn't wait a second longer and immediately brought down the light wind sword to strike at Zhou Badong. At that moment, a group of heavily armored men suddenly burst into the Zhou clan courtyards. This group of people had only 20 people around. Each member seemed to be disciplined as if they were born to serve the military. Even as they rushed toward Jian Chen, each step they made had been unanimous. "Clan leader, the King Tiger squad has arrived." A middle-aged man cried out to Zhou Badong from the back of the group. Hearing that, Zhou Budong's eyes shook as he fiercely stabbed at Jian Chen once more with his great sword before looking at the group of 20. "King Tiger squad, hear me. I want you to kill this brat immediately." The King Tiger squad was the result of 30 years' worth of training and expenses from the Zhou clan. From a total amount of 300 people, each one of them had been embroiled in a series of close combat examinations before leaving behind only 20 men. These 20 men were the King Tiger squad and had the strongest of the Zhou clan in it. "Yes." The 20 members of the King Tiger squad instantly cried out in answer and charged straight at Jian Chen with their saint weapons at a blinding speed. Sensing the strong amount of qi radiating from the King Tiger squad, Jian Chen felt a little bit of shock in his heart. Each and every single one of these 20 members were at the very least as strong as a Saint Master. This must be the Zhou clan's trump card. Jian Chen thought to himself. Just as he thought about that, the King Tiger squad had already reached 100 meters within range of Jian Chen with their saint weapons outstretched. At the same time, Zhou Badong and Zhou Yun both flew at Jian Chen to strike simultaneously. Jian Chen moved back a few steps in order to avoid Zhou Badong and Zhou Yun's strike. The light wind sword disappeared in a silver blur as it slid by the saint weapons of the King Tiger squad and flew at the throats of a few of their members. Following the traces of the light wind sword, it flew toward the King Tiger squad in a silver blur and slid across their throats, taking away their lives. In a flash, the 20 men from the King Tiger squad had been completely wiped out by Jian Chen. Seeing how quickly the King Tiger squad was killed, Zhou Badong began to tremble furiously as his wrath grew to unprecedented levels. The King Tiger squad was an especially precious treasure to him and were the elite task force that he had poured countless hours of training into. As Zhou Badong continued to think about this newest development, the sound of Jian Chen's light wind sword emitted a bright glow of light that screeched at him as it stabbed toward his throat. Zhou Badong immediately lifted his sword to block the thrust of the light wind sword, but as the two made contact, the force from the light wind sword caused him to move a few steps back. Jian Chen didn't give Zhou Badong any time to relax and immediately drew closer to him. His sword moved inexplicably fast as it lashed out once more. After that, the third and fourth strike had struck out simultaneously with a speed that rivaled the first two strikes. The light wind sword disappeared within a blur of light as the phantom traces of the blade overlapped with its real body. This one strike was unbelievably fast, giving Zhou Badong no time to react. Pieces. Zhou Budong's eyes could only widen as the light wind sword surpassed what he could react against and pierced through his throat. Chapter 218. The city lord Zhou Badong looked at the bloody light wind sword that had been stabbed through his throat with a look of utter disbelief. He didn't possibly think that a 20-year-old youth would be able to kill him so easily. Right now, Zhou Badong couldn't believe how strong he was. He thought he was in a dream. The events that had occurred in this hour had developed far too fast for him to take in. Just earlier, he had been the leader of the high and mighty Zhou clan discussing the matters of a magical beast wave with the Wake City Defensive Guard commander. But now, not even half an hour after that, his Zhou clan had been completely destroyed. Zhou Badong heaved a heavy sigh in unwillingness before closing his eyes and allowing his elderly body to hit the ground slowly. Jian Chen stared at Zhou Budong's fall to the ground coldly without any emotion. Thanks to the memories of his previous incarnation, his determination had been rather resolute. Even if he were to massacre many people, he wouldn't be affected too much. Slowly, the light wind sword was pulled out from Zhou Budong's neck as Jian Chen turned to look for Zhou Yun. However, his face darkened as he looked at the bodies that littered the floors of the courtyard. Yet Zhou Yun was nowhere to be found. At this, Jian Chen's eyes narrowed, so he ran away. As he spoke, Jian Chen looked at the dead bodies on the floor before finally looking at the space belt on Zhou Butong's waist. With 2 steps forward, Jian Chen had grabbed at the space belt. Zhou Butong was the leader of a clan after all. The items within his possession would surely be expensive. Just outside the corner of Jian Chen's eye, he noticed a single thread on Zhou Butong's neck. Hidden by the blood and cloth of Zhou Butong, Jian Chen had then finally found the secret the corpse was hiding. This hidden string was almost invisible to the naked eye. It had only been revealed after the blood dyed the string a shiny red, allowing Jian Chen to discover it. Jian Chen slowly parted the cloth away from Zhou Butong's bloody neck to reveal a ring tied to a piece of string that led down to his stomach. The moment Jian Chen found the space ring, his eyes began to sparkle as he cried out in surprise, "This is a space ring." There was a large amount of happiness in his voice. This space ring had been personally hidden and worn by Zhou Butong. With such a secret, there would definitely be a hidden treasure within this. Pulling at the hidden space ring away from Zhou Butong's neck, Jian Chen was exceptionally happy. Although he hadn't yet looked at the items within, he stored it within his own space ring. He didn't have time to look at it for now, so he immediately rushed out of the courtyards. The moment Jian Chen had exited the courtyards, he immediately heard the sound of voices of a few men who had heard the fight take place in the courtyards. Everyone's faces were full of shock as they looked at the Zhou courtyard. Their unwavering gazes stared at the horrifying view, as if they couldn't believe what had just happened. The Zhou clan had been completely destroyed in an instant. "Out of the way, out of the way! Everyone get out of the way!" At this moment, an extremely loud sound cried out from behind the group. The dense group of people standing near the Zhou clan courtyards immediately saw a group of heavily armored men with weapons who were running straight through them. "Isn't that the city lord of Wake City? I didn't think he would come here as well." From the midst of everyone, a group of heavily armored men walked forward. One man in particular wearing a black robe stood tall. His eyes shined with a purpose as sharp as his sword. From the perspective of a regular person, the man's skin resembled that of copper, and combined with his stature, the man looked rather intimidating. This was the city lord of Wake City, Yunli. Under the protection of the city guards, the city lord of Wake City, Yunli continued to walk into the Zhou clan courtyards. Stepping through the gates, he could only see the large amount of bodies littered about. Yunli walked forward a few more steps before coming to a stop as he looked at the corpses with a heavy expression. Finally, his eyes landed upon the dead body of Zhou Butong before his face became like stone. "AI!" Yunli cried out as he closed his eyes sadly. Standing right next to him was the commander of Wake City's defensive guards, Duo Li. Sighing, Duo Li couldn't believe what he was seeing before speaking out with a dejected tone, "Lord, we came a moment too late." At this, Yunli once more opened his eyes as he stared at the multiple bodies strewn across the ground. Finally suppressing the sadness within his heart, he only then realized that every single man had a wound on their throats. It was only just that one wound, and Zhou Butong was no exception either. Duo Li, the one that came here to declare revenge on the Zhou clan, was a single 20-year-old youth, correct? Yunli stared at Commander Duo Li with a cold face. "Yes, my lord." From his appearances, his age was estimated to be around 20 years old, an exceptionally young face. Duo Li spoke out frantically. Hearing this, Yunli went silent as he began to think. So the Zhou clan has been destroyed. This has weakened our defensive troops for the magical beast wave by a large amount, yet with this young expert in our Wake City, if we can rope him in, we will be able to defend ourselves against the magical beasts with ease. The Lord is quite wise. Your subordinate here thought of the same thing. Duo Li spoke out with a serious expression. "Come, he hasn't gone too far yet. Let us chase after him." Yunli began to walk even faster as he led Duo Li and the group of guards out of the courtyard. Afterward, Yunli began to chase after the bloody footprints Jian Chen had left behind. Jian Chen slowly walked through the streets with furrowed eyebrows as he thought to himself. He had no idea how he would find Uncle Kendall's family. Wake City wasn't too small, but there was still a few 100,000 people. Just finding two people within a population like that was no simple task. Plus, right now Jianchen couldn't even guarantee that Uncle Kendall's family was still living in Wake City or if they had moved out of the city. To try and find the family would be like finding a needle in a haystack. Uncle Kendall, don't worry. No matter what, I will find your family and take care of them. I will definitely let them live happily for their entire lives. Jianchen muttered to himself. However, before he could fully commit himself to finding Kendall's family, he first had to deal with the Tianxiong clan. In the beginning, Jianchen had been forced to run away from Wake City thanks to the Tianxiong clan. This grudge he had for them could be said to be extremely deep and was unforgettable. He also knew that because he had killed Tianxiong Lai's son, Tianxiong Kong, their grudge against him was equally deep. This had gone far beyond what could be solved with words. One side would have to be wiped out. If he didn't deal with the Tianxiong clan, then Jianchen wouldn't dare to try to find news about Uncle Kendall's family. Otherwise, in case the Tianxiong clan found out there was a connection between him and Kendall's family, then they would try to place him in a trap that would be inescapable and unavoidable. Chapter 219. Invitation of the City Lord. Fellow brother, please wait a moment. As Jianchen continued walking, a sound suddenly rang out from behind, accompanied by the sounds of heavy footsteps. Jianchen's eyes furrowed together as he turned his head, only to see a squad of heavily armored soldiers running at him quickly with two middle-aged men leading the squad. He looked at the armored pair of men with a suspicious look. Although he realized one of them was the man he saw not too long ago, the commander of Wake City's defensive troops, Duo Li. Seeing these troops from Wake City approach him, Jianchen couldn't help but feel suspicious. He had no idea if these men were here for the sole purpose of capturing him for his eradication of the Zhou clan. Yet while Jianchen didn't fear these men, he wanted to find Uncle Kendall's family within Wake City. It was for this reason that he wasn't yet willing to fight with the local ruler of Wake City. Fellow brother, please wait. Seeing Jianchen slow down, Duo Li called out to him once more as he urged his group to go faster. Jianchen looked at Duo Li and his group of men next to him before asking Duo Li, Commander Duo Li, is there a problem? Commander Duo Li revealed a cordial smile as he gave a salute to Jianchen. Fellow brother, this is the Lord of Wake City. He pointed to the middle-aged man next to him. The leader of Wake City. Jianchen was a bit startled. Immediately looking at the Lord, he cupped his hands together. So you are the Lord of Wake City. This one is Jianchen. Excuse this one for his lack of knowledge. When the city lord had first heard that Jianchen was a 20-year-old that had reached the great Saint Master level, he originally thought that Jianchen was from a clan with a strong background. At this moment, he saw neither the rich robes or the air of arrogance, making his impression of Jianchen neither good nor bad. The Lord of Wake City cupped his hands together. So you are called Jianchen, this one is called Yunli. Brother Jianchen, if it's not too much to ask, just call me elder brother Yunli instead of Lord if that can be avoided. Seeing Jianchen's calm face, Yunli could ascertain that whether it was his expression or the strange attitude of Jianchen, he was no ordinary person. Despite the fact that Jianchen was wearing mediocre quality clothing, the city lord didn't look down on Jianchen at all. Instead, he had actually admired him for a moment. Hearing the words of Yunli, Jianchen understood that he was trying to make friends with him. However, he still didn't dare to lower his guard, since with Yunli's strength, he couldn't afford to treat him as nothing. What might Lord Yunli want to do with this one? Jianchen spoke with a smile and a calm tone. Laughing, Yunli said, Brother Jianchen, talking on this street is rather inconvenient. Would you mind coming with me back to my mansion? Upon hearing those words, Jianchen's heart beat wildly as he suddenly thought about his problem with Uncle Kendall's family. Without any hesitation, he complied with the Lord. The mansion of the city lord was located within the heart of Wake City and was the most magnificent of buildings in the city. It was built over several square kilometers and was also the largest building. Even the mercenary union couldn't compare in size to the mansion. Around the building, many squads of men constantly patrolled around it day and night without any corner unsearched, making this building a heavily guarded area. Within the mansion's main hall, the city lord Yunli had even given up his usual seat at the throne to instead lower himself to the status of Jianchen and sat on the same level as Jianchen. As they waited, a few female waitresses began to serve them by occasionally serving them a cup of tea. The two began to chat with each other for a while before finally getting down to the main problem. Brother Jianchen, I'm sure you realize that our Wake City is about to face off against a wave of magical beasts. This is a test of life or death for our Wake City. In the case that we fail to defend Wake City from these magical beasts, then the tens of thousands of people will become the meal of the magical beasts, so I sincerely hope that Brother Jianchen will lend his power to help defend Wake City. Yun Li's smile had faded from his face and a serious look replaced it as he began to talk about this serious topic. Jianchen laughed. The city lord truly thinks too highly of this one. I am one who walks the path of solitude. What reason would I have to protect the population of Wake City from this wave of magical beasts? At Jianchen's words, Yun Li's face tightened as he realized Jianchen had no plans on protecting Wake City from the wave of magical beasts. Before he could say something, Jianchen continued to speak. However, since I'm already at Wake City, I may as well participate. Yet, whether or not Wake City survives the magical beast wave, this one cannot guarantee that. Jianchen's words made Yun Li's eyes widen immediately as he smiled joyously. Just hearing these words from Brother Jianchen makes this one feel at ease. When Brother Jianchen joins Wake City, then our city will definitely be safe from this danger once more. At this moment, Commander Duo Li suddenly burst through the doors and quickly walked toward Yun Li. Giving a complicated look at Jianchen, he bent down to whisper something into Yun Li's ears. Seeing how the Lord of Wake City Yun Li's face grow even more serious before a look of massive confusion overtook his face, Jianchen had a complicated look on his face as well. After seeing how the gradual change in Yun Li's face, Jianchen began to feel curious. Although he didn't know what words had been said to elicit such a massive change, Jianchen could begin to guess at an idea or two of what the situation might be after Yun Li and Duo Li had stared at him. Suddenly, Jianchen's eyes flashed as he thought to himself, could it be a matter regarding to the Tianxiong clan? Jianchen's enemies within Wake City were very few, but after seeing Yun Li's face grew extremely serious, there could only be one other answer after the Zhou clan and Zhou mercenaries were ruled out. Tianxiong Lai from the Tianxiong clan knew of his name, and after Jianchen had killed his son Tianxiong Kong, there was a grudge that could never be resolved peacefully. Chapter 220. Destruction of the Tianxiong clan, 1. Yun Li's face began to darken as Duo Li continued to speak into his ear non-stop with an even grimmer expression. After Commander Duo Li had finished talking, Yun Li turned back to Jianchen with a bewildered expression, yet he did not leave. Yun Li furrowed his eyebrows together as he continued to look at Jianchen. With a moment's hesitation, he finally spoke. Brother Jianchen. 1 year ago in Wake City a major event took place. The number 1 clan in Wake City, the Tianxiong clan, had their young lord Tianxiong Kong killed by someone. And if this piece of information is reliable, then the person who killed Tianxiong Kong is a youth that isn't too far apart in age with you. Most importantly, this youth's name is also Jianchen. Surely that means the two of you are the same person. Hearing this, Jianchen's facial expressions didn't change at all. This type of end result was something he should have anticipated long ago. Without any other words, he smiled. The Lord is correct, that person is this one. Although he had long since guessed that this answer was coming, Yun Li still couldn't help but feel his heart rate speed up after hearing Jianchen's answer. Although this matter regarding Jianchen and the Tianxiong clan was completely unrelated to this magical beast wave, this was still a crucial moment where the lives of tens of thousands of citizens were at stake. This wasn't a time for them to be sloppy. The entire defense force had to be one cohesive unit in order to help defend Wake City. Whether it was Jianchen or the Tianxiong clan, they were still one of the bigger powers of Wake City. With this hatred between the two of them, it would bring about a huge headache for Yun Li since he knew that the two were like fire if put together. He was afraid that if they were to get too close to each other, then there would definitely be huge losses for everyone. If this was any other time, Yun Li wouldn't have cared, but at this moment where a wave of magical beasts would be coming soon, he definitely wanted to avoid the explosion that would happen in between them. At the very least, until the magical beast wave was over, he could not let Wake City lose any more power. Yun Li looked at Jianchen seriously. Brother Jianchen. Even I have heard about the grudge between you and the Tianxiong clan, and while I myself would like to stay out of it, Wake City is in a moment of crisis at the moment. We need to protect this city, so I would hope that you and the Tianxiong clan can put aside your differences temporarily until the wave is over. Would Brother Jianchen agree to this? Yunli spoke courteously. Since he had placed Jianchen in a high position now, he wouldn't dare try to belittle him whether or not he had the support of a clan. Jianchen shook his head as his eyes narrowed. Lord Yunli, I'm afraid my answer will disappoint you. Hearing this, Yunli's face dropped slightly. His heart knew that answer was coming, yet he still wasn't willing to let the question drop. With a heavy heart, he asked once more, Brother Jianchen, please pay attention to the current situation. Furthermore, the Tianxiong clan is even stronger than the Zhou clan. Despite the calamity they faced a year ago and losing the #1 clan title in Wake City, they remained strong-willed. No matter how much they lost, the Tianxiong clan still is one of the strongest clans and are not to be belittled. Jian Chen's heart shook for a moment after listening to Yunli. Lord Yunli, aside from Tianxiong Lai, what other experts does the Tianxiong clan have? Yunli hesitated for a moment before saying, aside from Tianxiong Lai, there is another middle great Saint Master expert who is the younger brother of Tianxiong Lai. His name is Tianxiong Daoyun. Other than that, Tianxiong Lai has a few connections with some of the captains of the stronger mercenary groups. If they were to unite, then their power would be extraordinarily terrifying. After finding out this piece of information, Jian Chen's face still didn't make a change in expression. He simply had the same reaction as before while he sipped his cup of tea. Seeing how calm Jian Chen was as if he didn't care at all for the Tianxiong clan, Yun Li's inner thoughts were finally decided. He was afraid that Jian Chen had an extremely strong background supporting him, but that couldn't be said for sure. He wasn't even sure if a high-leveled expert was protecting him either. Yun Li was a meticulous person. The moment he saw that Jian Chen didn't have any plans of letting the Tianxiong clan go, he didn't plan on trying to convince Jian Chen anymore. To him now, Jian Chen was worth far more than the Tianxiong clan was. Even if Jian Chen had no background to support him, for a youth like him to be able to kill a great Saint Master, this was a talent that transcended the heavens. With some time, his achievements throughout the Tianyuan continent would be known to all. After Jian Chen left the mansion, the sky had already turned dark. While he was still in the mansion, Jian Chen didn't ask about Uncle Kendall's family. In his opinion, that matter would be best done when the matter between him and the Tianxiong clan was finished. This was the best and safest way to find out about Kendall's family. The day was already all but gone, and Jian Chen had already fought in 2 different battles. This had led to a huge decrease in his energy, so now was not the time Jian Chen wanted to fight against the Tianxiong clan. Instead, he began to look for a restaurant and inn to stay for the night. Time quickly flew by as morning came. Jian Chen opened his eyes from his sitting cultivation position. All of the energy he had used up yesterday had been completely recovered, making him able to operate at his peak condition once more. After Jian Chen left the inn, he listened to the random discussions of the people outside regarding the total annihilation of both the Zhou mercenaries and Zhou clan. The Zhou clan and Zhou mercenaries had very strong reputations within Wake City, but for them to both be exterminated in such a short amount of time, this news had quickly spread throughout the city like wildfire. No matter if it was a small or large street, every person was talking about it. At the same time, every single major power within Wake City had immediately set out to scout for information the moment they heard about this. The Tianxiong clan used to be the #1 power in Wake City, and their might was known to everyone. No matter where he went, Jian Chen would be able to hear about the Tianxiong clan. Chapter 221 Destruction of the Tianxiong clan 2. The Tianxiong clan was positioned in the northern part of the city. Just past the large halls of the Tianxiong courtyards, the Tianxiong clan's leader Tianxiong Lai sat upon his throne with 2 people by his side. Both of them were young, but their presence was unusual and their eyes flickered with an unusual light, making others feel that these 2 were not like common people. A year ago, even though the Tianxiong clan had suffered a tremendous loss from Jian Chen and were no longer the #1 clan in the eyes of Wake City, everyone still understood that the Tianxiong clan's peak experts had not weakened at all. In terms of martial prowess, they still maintained the spot of the #1 clan. The main reason was because of Tianxiong Lai. Although he had stopped at the middle Great Saint Master level, he had an Earth-attributed Saint force which granted him superiority over others. Even those at the peak Great Saint Master level wouldn't be able to contend against Tianxiong Lai. However, in terms of controlling Wake City, the Tianxiong clan was no longer in power like it used to be. That was because Tianxiong Kang's death had brought a great amount of pain to Tianxiong Lai. Because of that, he didn't pay enough attention to the control his Tianxiong clan had over Wake City, therefore their power declined despite having enough martial power to maintain it. Tianxiong Lai himself had changed drastically during this year as well. His entire body grew thin and even his hair became gray. Tianxiong Lai had a smile on his face as he looked at the men in front of him. There was a lively look to their faces, and if anyone were to recognize them, they would be so surprised that their jaws would drop. That was because these people were the very well-known figures and captains of the larger mercenary groups in Wake City. Each one of them represented a different mercenary group and were very strong men in their own rights. Each mercenary group had a number of over 100 people with a strength that was not like most groups. Among the group in front of him, there were even 2 elders who held 2 different clans with large amounts of political power. These groups of men could even be said to hold an incredible amount of power within Wake City. It was only when something major was about to happen that they would all convene together. Otherwise, it would be very hard for everyone to meet up, thus anyone that saw this sight would be astonished. Fellow brothers, I've invited everyone here today for their assistance in helping me kill a person. Tianxiong Lai spoke out to the representatives of each mercenary group with a loud voice. Tianxiong Lai, we've been friends for over a dozen years now. Whatever it is you need help with, then all you need is to ask. As long as I have the power, I will do it. After Tianxiong Lai had spoken, a sturdy-looking middle-aged man had answered him. That's right, Tianxiong Lai. With our friendship, whatever it is you need help with, you just have to ask. You don't have to beat around the bush like a virgin on her wedding night. Spoke a dark tan man. He wore short pants, revealing bulges of muscle on his legs. From the looks of it, those legs looked as if they were capable of bending a steel plate in half with a simple kick. After that, the entire group of men began to call out their agreement to helping out Tianxiong Lai. After hearing this, Tianxiong Lai had a faint smile on his face as he sat there. Almost if he had remembered something, the smile on his face quickly receded. In a circle of emotions, Tianxiong Lai suddenly had a painful expression. Fellow brothers, do you still remember when my son Tianxiong Kong was killed a year ago? Hearing that, everyone looked at each other with a solemn face. However, no one spoke out. It was as if they were waiting for Tianxiong Lai to say something. Tianxiong Lai continued to speak. A year ago, a single youth entered Wake City and murdered my son Tianxiong Kong. Not only that, but he dealt a serious blow to my Tianxiong clan, and despite me personally chasing after him, it was to no avail due to his cunningness. Using the terrain of the magical Beast Mountain range to ambush and kill the experts of my Tianxiong clan, in the end, he finally escaped from my grasp. Tianxiong Lai's face began to grow more and more wrathful as he talked. He despised Jianchen down to the bone because not only did Jianchen kill his son Tianxiong Kong, but he had even played around with Tianxiong Lai while in the magical Beast Mountain range. To him, this was a personal disgrace. He had never been beaten to such a miserable degree by anyone of a lower level of strength like this before. Tianxiong Lai, could it be the murderer of your son has returned to Wake City once more? The dark-skinned person from before spoke out once more. Tianxiong Lai nodded his head slightly. Surely everyone has heard about the major event yesterday. Not only was the Zhou mercenaries eradicated, but the Zhou clan itself was destroyed in a single day. However, after a small investigation, the man who destroyed both the Zhou clan and Zhou mercenaries was a 20-year-old youth named Jianchen. Everyone's face immediately hardened like stone the moment they heard that final sentence, along with a mixture of extreme shock. They had already heard about the massacre of the Zhou clan, but they hadn't known as much about the matter as Tianxiong Lai. What surprised them the most was that the person who had destroyed both groups in a single day was merely a 20-year-old youth. This was all but inconceivable to them. Immediately the whole group went quiet as they processed this piece of information. After a while, an elder broke the silence. Tianxiong Lai, this Jian Qin who destroyed the Zhou clan, he surely must not be weak at all. Tianxiong Lai shook his head slightly with furrowed eyebrows. I fought against him a year ago and understood his strength quite well. At the most, he was nothing more than a saint master and wasn't even able of handling a single blow from me. Yet, he was also extremely fast so that even as I chased him I had to use quite a large amount of energy. Because of this, he escaped from me. Furthermore, his sword strokes were extremely fast as well. Anyone on his level of strength would simply not have enough time to react, and in that moment he was able to kill the saint masters of my clan in the magical Beast Mountain range. Although this was a year ago, even if he was able to improve his strength, there must be a limit. Even a genius with an outstanding potential would not be able to make a breakthrough from a Saint Master to the peak Great Saint Master or Earth Saint Master in the span of a single year. So it is my guess that he had some help with eradicating the Zhou clan. Tianxiong Lai, do you mean to ask if you want our help to capture the assassin who killed your son? A regular-looking man asked. I've invited everyone here today not to help capture him, but to help block him if he tries to escape once more. I do not wish for him to slip away from my grasp again, and if he truly does dare to appear within Wake City, then I, Tianxiong Lai, swear that he will not leave the city alive. Tianxiong Lai pledged. As he spoke, his tone gradually grew colder and colder as his eyes began to spark with a killing intent. Chapter 222, Destruction of the Tianxiong Clan, 3. While the group of people within the hall conversed with each other, a 20-year-old youth wearing a white robe walked to the Tianxiong clan's gates. He was rather handsome with a face that could only be described as perfect. Adding his natural charm to his personality, he could definitely not be considered someone of normal status. This youth was Jian Qin. Seeing the main halls, Jian Qin's eyes sparked with a huge desire to kill. The memory of when he had first been chased by Tianxiong Lai out of Wake City was still quite clear in his mind. Jian Qin was normally not a man who would thought narrow-mindedly, but against the Tianxiong clan, he would not let them go. Return kindness with kindness and return animosity with animosity. If there was a trickle of kindness, return it with a gushing spring of kindness. If the hatred was carved deep within the bones, then return the favor 100 times back. This was the personal motto that Jian Qin had carried with him from his time as a hermit in his past world. Even today, Jian Qin had not changed his style of thought. The courtyard of the Tianxiong clan was rather simple with gates that were tall and remained open without a problem. Upon looking in, one could see 8 sturdy and resilient men who would return the stares with a bright eye. Jian Qin slowed down his pace as he calmly walked toward the open courtyard as if he was taking a walk. In fact, just looking at him would seem as if he hadn't a single amount of hostility. The 8 guards at the gates realized Jian Qin was coming toward them, so the moment he approached, 2 men blocked the path and called out to him. Halt! What matters might you have here? Staring at the 2 men in front of him, Jian Qin finally revealed a cold smile. I've come to kill you all. The guards all stared blankly at him as they processed his answer. While thinking about what he had just said with a loosened guard, there was suddenly a bright flash of light as Jian Qin's light wind sword suddenly struck out at the guards. Immediately, the tip of the sword had pierced through each one of their throats. Jian Qin's attack had been too sudden, and for these guards who only possessed the strength of a great saint, they weren't even able to pull out their saint weapons. So, in a blink of an eye, these 8 guards were killed without trouble. After killing these people, Jian Qin continued forward past the threshold into the courtyards where a group of members were at. Who are you? Stop right there. The moment Jian Qin entered the courtyard, a large explosion of sounds rang out around him as the shadows of 2 men suddenly flew at Jian Qin from not too far away. Jian Qin laughed to himself. It is no wonder the Tianxiong clan used to be the #1 clan. Who would have thought that right next to the courtyard gates there would be 2 Saint Masters waiting to ambush someone? The speed these Saint Masters were traveling at was extremely fast. In the moment Jian Qin was thinking to himself, They had already arrived at Jian Chen's side and brought out their swords in preparation to fight against him. A strong amount of saint force accompanied their swords as they swung out at Jian Chen. These two saint masters had been guarding the gates from the inside, and the moment they saw Jian Chen cross into the courtyard, they sprung into action. Since they could see the dead bodies of the 8 guards, they knew Jian Chen was not a weak foe and spared no words before engagement. The saint weapons flew within half a meter away from Jian Chen when the light wind sword immediately reappeared within Jian Chen's hands. With a silver arc of light, the light wind sword flew out at the two swords with an inconceivable speed. Before the two saint weapons could even get within 3 inches of Jian Chen, he had already speared the throats of the two saint masters. After that, Jian Chen's body flickered as he reappeared 3 steps away from his original position to avoid the two saint weapons that continued to fall down from inertia. Because it was currently morning, the Tianxiong clan's courtyard had plenty of people doing their morning exercises. Some members were even patrolling around, but the moment they had seen Jian Chen kill the two saint masters, they had naturally stopped where they were and cried out a warning. "An assassin is here! Someone's causing a disturbance! An enemy is at our gates, everyone prepare yourself." The previously quiet Tianxiong clan had erupted into a cacophony of sounds as the panicked shouts of everyone rang through the air. Practically everyone with confidence flew at Jian Chen while everyone else immediately ran back into the halls to warn the leader of the Tianxiong clan, Tianxiong Lai. Seeing the group of people instantly break apart, Jian Chen's previously impassive face grew colder as he sneered. Soon after, the light wind sword swung into motion to meet with his enemies head-on. Following the bright silver glow of light, the men who brandished their saint weapons were instantly killed by Jian Chen's sword. Jian Chen had an absolute determination to kill anyone in the Tianxiong clan, so he didn't dare let any one of them escape. As the shouts and cries grew louder, more and more people from the Tianxiong clan were startled awake, and they all began to run toward the origin of the sound. Although the clan had fallen a bit the past year, it had originally been Wake City's #1 clan, so one couldn't underestimate the clan's strength. The amount of people in the courtyard alone was quite large. As more and more people rushed over, Jian Chen gradually became surrounded. Within the main halls of the Tianxiong clan, Tianxiong Lai was consulting with the few captains of the mercenary groups, but the moment he had heard the sounds of battle outside, his eyebrows furrowed together in confusion. Even the mercenary captains all looked at each other with doubt and puzzlement as they tried to think of what could be happening. "What's happening outside? Why is there so much noise?" Tianxiong Lai cried out in complaint to those around him. "Clan leader, there is a man who's causing trouble with our Tianxiong clan. Without warning, he has already killed 10 of our guards." A man hurriedly cried out as he came running into the halls. Tianxiong Lai's eyes grew furious as he thundered, "What? So someone dared to cause trouble for our Tianxiong clan?" "Yes, my lord. That man is extremely strong, and even the two Saint Master Guards were killed by him." The man replied, "Umph." Tianxiong Lai's eyes radiated a hateful aura as he spat out, "He truly is too impatient for death to cause such a commotion within our Tianxiong clan. Let me see what kind of person he truly is." Chapter 223, Destruction of the Tianxiong Clan, 4. As the cries of battle and death rang out in the courtyard, practically over 100 people had already gathered there and blockaded the area so tight that even water wouldn't be able to get through. The white-robed Jian Chen clenched his light wind sword as he continued to weave through the group of people. With each movement he made, he killed yet another member of the Tianxiong clan. The silver light of his sword never ceased to stop flashing as each sword stroke he made slammed straight through the throat of each person and claimed their life. His movements were like water, and even after being surrounded by a group of 100 people, his face remained as calm as ever. "Halt!" Suddenly, a loud shout cried out, causing the group of guards to immediately fall back with their eyes still staring at Jian Chen vigilantly. Tianxiong Lai flew toward the courtyard with a group of men right behind him. These men were the same ones who had just been talking with him in the main hall. Each one of them represented a different faction of the variety of power within Wake City. Tianxiong Lai entered the ring of people within the courtyard with a serious expression. When he noticed several dead members of the guards, his face took on a darker shade of color. In a brief moment, his eyes landed upon Jian Qin and promptly froze. The moment he had seen Jian Qin, his face began to tremble before emitting a large amount of killing intent from his eyes. He was looking at Jian Qin as if he were a dangerous animal. "You're Jian Qin." Tian Xiong spat out each word angrily despite the relatively calm expression on his face. Although in his eyes, the slightest tint of red could be seen. Jian Qin smiled. "Leader of the Tianxiong clan, I didn't think you would still remember me." Tianxiong Lai's entire body was shaking now. Right in front of him was the murderer of his son Tianxiong Kong. How could he ever forget about him? Even in his dreams every night, he would constantly be reminded of Jian Chen's existence despite seeing him a small number of times a year ago. Yet at the same time, Jian Chen's face was forever burned into the very depths of Tianxiong Lai's mind so that he would never be able to forget it. "Jian Chen, this old man was prepared to look for you, but I didn't think that you'd take the initiative to come knocking at my door. Since it's like this, you should be prepared to never set foot out of this place alive." Tianxiong Lai spat as his eyes looked at him with a great deal of animosity. With a smile of disdain, Jian Chen said, "Tianxiong Lai, you couldn't prevent me from escaping a year ago. And here we are 1 year later with you saying that you will. With just your tiny Tianxiong clan, you don't have the qualifications to do that." Tianxiong Lai's eyes flashed dangerously at that. When the Saint Master-level Jian Chen had escaped from him after all he had caused, it had left an unwashable stain on his honor. However, what Tianxiong Lai didn't know was that at the time, Jian Chen was merely a peak-level great saint with a good amount of distance from the Saint Master realm. "Brat, today I will see just how much you've changed since a year ago. Guards, block off his escape routes." A yellow glow began to flow down Tianxiong Lai's arm as he quickly grasped the newly formed battle axe and flew quickly toward Jian Chen to fight. "Ha!" With a single roar, Tianxiong Lai raised his battle axe into the air and with a deafening shout, he swung it down toward Jian Chen. A cold sneer appeared on Jian Chen's face. 1 year ago, this thunderous strike of Tianxiong Lai would have forced Jian Chen to dodge instead of block, but now the situation was different. A faint glow began to appear around Jian Chen's sword as he lifted it up to block against Tianxiong Lai's weapon without any fear. Seeing how Jian Chen wasn't trying to evade his strike, Tianxiong Lai's eyes flashed strangely. He thought Jian Chen was stupid to not try to dodge. When he fought against him a year ago, he could clearly tell that Jian Chen was overwhelmed by him. Today, he wouldn't ever have believed that Jian Chen's strength had increased to such a devastating degree. With a screeching sound, the battle axe clashed against the light wind sword in an attempt to shatter it with his saint force. Ding! The two weapons clashed against each other with a loud bang as the saint force within the weapons repulsed each other and scattered out in massive ripples of energy visible to the naked eye. Upon reaching the stone floors below, they instantly cracked and split as if made of tofu with a series of cobweb-like cracks spreading everywhere. After the weapons had slammed against each other, Tianxiong Lai's eyes widened as he looked at Jian Chen in disbelief. Reflected deep within his eyes, fear began to surface. From that one exchange, Tianxiong Lai had a better understanding of Jian Chen's strength. The Jian Chen now had a strength that was completely different compared to a year ago. Back then, if Jian Chen wasn't so fast, he wouldn't have been able to constantly evade him and would have died like an ant underneath Tianxiong Lai's foot. But now, the previously weak ant had grown to become a mighty dragon that could fight against him on an equal level. That fact sent Tianxiong Lai reeling with disbelief. In fact, Tianxiong Lai felt that this Jian Chen in front of him and the Jian Chen from the past were two completely different people. The difference between the two was just too great. Jian Chen staggered back a few steps. Although he was able to defend himself against Tianxiong Lai's strike, he still wasn't completely matched in pure strength. Although Tianxiong Lai was a middle great saint master and had a strength that was greater than Jian Chen's by a certain amount, it was his mastery of the earth-attributed saint force that actually granted him an overwhelming superiority. Even peak great saint masters weren't much stronger than him in terms of fighting strength. Jian Chen was clearly the weaker one in this collision of attacks. In contrast, Tianxiong Lai still stood where he had been before. However, His legs had now sunk deeper into the ground by a single inch. "Brat, I didn't think that your strength would be so vastly different in the time span of a single year." Tianxiong Lai stared darkly at Jianchen. "However, even with this major change, you will still not make it out alive." With that, he flew at Jianchen once more. Chapter 224, Destruction of the Tianxiong Clan, 5. Jianchen's sword arm flew toward Tianxiong Lai with an intense amount of sword qi flowing all around his light wind sword. Against the strong amount of sword qi, Tianxiong Lai didn't bother to evade. Instead, he used his earth attribute-infused battle axe to defend himself. As Jianchen slashed downward with his sword qi-infused sword, Tianxiong Lai's body suddenly shook as his sword received the impact. After that, Jianchen's body flickered away from view and then reappeared behind him. "You are seeking death." Seeing Jianchen rush at him from behind, Tianxiong Lai's eyes flashed dangerously once more as his battle axe exploded with saint force and he swung it. This time, Jianchen didn't bother to counter it and instead decided to dodge the battle axe. At the same time, his light wind sword became a streak of silver light as it flew toward Tianxiong Lai's throat. His sword was faster than Tianxiong Lai's axe by a large margin. By the time Tianxiong Lai could even react, the light wind sword was already closing in on his throat. Although his last exchange with Tianxiong Lai had determined him to be at a disadvantage, but strength wasn't his strongest point. In truth, Jianchen relied on a speed so fast that his opponent would not be able to react in time. "What a fast sword!" Tianxiong Lai spoke out with some surprise. However, he was a veteran of hundreds of battles. Quickly, a large amount of Earth Saint force overflowed and encased his body. By the time Jianchen's light wind sword had struck Tianxiong Lai, his Earth Saint force had already fully formed around his body like a defensive armor. The sword shook from the impact slightly before stopping in place. In the next moment, the intense amount of sword qi from the light wind sword shot forward and pierced through the defenses of the Earth Saint force and continued on toward Tianxiong Lai's throat. Because of this moment of delay, Tianxiong Lai could safely retreat backward before hurriedly slamming his battle axe down onto the sword. With a turn of his wrist, the light wind sword instantly struck out another 3 times. Each sword stroke accurately stabbed against the same position on the axe. When the 3 strokes overlapped with each other, it caused the battle axe to be repelled backward because of the multiplied force. Tianxiong Lai held onto his battle axe with both hands in disbelief. When Jianchen had stabbed at his battle axe 3 times, the amount of force behind it was strong enough for the vibrations to completely paralyze his arms for a moment. "Is this person in front of me really the same Jianchen as the one from a year ago?" Tianxiong Lai asked himself. His strength had improved far too much in a single year for him to believe. The moment Tianxiong Lai had that thought, another streak of white light arced toward him once more. By the time Tianxiong Lai regained his bearings, the sword was once again near his throat and had already started to cut into it. The sword drew a look of pain on his face as some blood began to drip down his neck. At this stage between life and death, Tianxiong Lai had an alarmed face as he immediately turned his face away so that his neck would not be completely speared through. Whoosh! Just as Tianxiong Lai dodged the blow, a cold gust of wind blew past him accompanied with the slight stinging sensation on his neck. The light wind sword's blade barely nicked his neck with the sharp layer of sword qi that enveloped the sword. Despite the sword nicking Tianxiong Lai's neck, it only sliced through the topmost layer of his skin. If he had reacted just 1/2 second slower, he would have been struck through the neck and his life would have been claimed by the light wind sword. Tianxiong Lai flew backward with a cry as his Earth Saint force surged out of his body once more. As it enveloped his body, his hand reached out to touch his neck subconsciously. Looking down, he saw that his hand was already nearly completely wet with blood. A bone-chilling air descended upon Tianxiong Lai as his face paled. Jianchen's strength had already far surpassed what he had initially estimated it to be. At this moment, Tianxiong Lai couldn't help but be skeptical. With his own strength, would he really be able to avenge the murder of his own son? "Everyone, please lend me your strength." Tianxiong Lai barked out without hesitation toward the group of people watching him. Upon hearing Tianxiong Lai's plea, The few people that he had initially invited hesitated for a moment before throwing themselves at Jianchen to stop him. Whoever dares to start trouble with our Tianxiong clan is surely too impatient for death. At that moment, another voice called out from behind the Tianxiong clan's courtyard. As everyone turned around to look, the shadow of a person quickly flew over and landed right in the midst of Jianchen and the incoming barrage of people. This man looked to be around 40 years old and wore a white robe made of expensive materials while looking very similar to Tianxiong Lai. His eyes landed upon the miserable-looking Tianxiong Lai before narrowing. Quickly stepping to reach his brother's side, he asked him, "Big brother, are you hurt?" This was the brother of Tianxiong Lai, Tianxiong Daoyan. Tianxiong Lai nodded his head slowly. "I'm fine," he whispered. Tianxiong Daoyan whipped his head up to look at Jianchen with eyes that could ignite anything caught in his glance on fire. "Big brother, who is he?" Tianxiong Lai stared darkly at Jianchen and spat out the words, "Daoyan, he is the murderer who killed my son." Tianxiong Daoyan's face hardened as he stared angrily at Jianchen. "So you're the one that killed my nephew, Tianxiong Kong." Jianchen looked at the two Tianxiong brothers before looking at the other people in front of him. There were a total of 7 other men. Aside from 2 elders, there were also 5 other middle-aged men who all exuded presences that Jianchen could feel. From their presences he could tell that these men were all at the Great Saint Master level, but the 2 elders and another black-robed middle-aged man were at the peak Great Saint Master level. "Everybody, this is a personal matter between the Tianxiong clan and I. For those who are not involved, please leave, otherwise, come if you will." Jianchen addressed the 7 men in front of him. The 7 people looked at each other for a brief moment before shaking their heads. Each one of them had personally seen Jianchen's strength for themselves. This was not the simplistic situation that Tianxiong Lai had said it would be. In their eyes, Tianxiong Lai had nearly died to Jianchen, and with this, they had started to fear Jianchen a bit. Even though they were good friends with Tianxiong Lai, when he was on the verge of death, they could only stand by the side and watch. Chapter 225. The death of Tianxiong Lai. Seeing the 7 people stay silent, Jianchen smiled coldly. "So it's like that? Then don't blame me for being impolite." With that, his arm shook in place as the light wind sword was immediately engulfed in a large amount of sword qi. The 7 men's face hardened as they threw away their hesitation and brought out their saint weapons. Jianchen's sword was extremely fast and flew out at such a high frequency that the 7 men were not only at a disadvantage, but they were also completely overwhelmed. The sword qi weaved in and out of the area as the light wind sword stabbed into the throats of several Tianxiong clansmen guards. Various saint weapons pulsed outward with their inner saint force, crashing and shattering apart the slabs of rock underneath and filling the air with the sounds clashing. In a short moment, Jianchen and the 7 other men had already exchanged a series of blows. The 7 men's faces were all unnaturally serious, even though they had already known how fast Jianchen's sword was. Now that they were personally up against it, the profoundness of his ability with his sword was all too terrifying for them to comprehend clearly. In this small moment, there were already 2 men who were injured. If it were not for the men by their side quickly pulling them out of the way or attempting to block Jianchen, then he would have left devastating blows and the men wouldn't have a life to fight back with. Seeing Jianchen fight furiously against the 7 men, Tianxiong Lai and Tianxiong Daoyan didn't waste a moment and instantly joined the group to fight against Jianchen to make it a total of 9 great saint masters against 1. From farther away, the few remaining guards stood still as they watched the fight seriously. With 10 great saint masters fighting in the same battle, 9 of them versus 1 in fact, it was a sight that left them thunderstruck. Especially since the fight was happening in such a remote city like Wake City and each fighter slashing out at another with a large amount of saint force, everyone couldn't help but be slack-jawed. Jianchen's body disappeared in a blur of white as he instantly dodged to the side to avoid a blow before retaliating with his own sword that flew at the 9 instantly. Ding! The sounds of saint weapons crashing against each other could be heard as Jianchen held his light wind sword against the others. At this moment, A cold wind could be heard from behind before a biting cold wind pressed against Jian Chen's shoulder tightly as a yellow-colored Saint Force-infused battle axe swung down on it. Suddenly, just as the battle axe began to emit more Earth Saint Force down onto the battle axe, in a split second, Jian Chen's body flickered away and reappeared a step further away and dodged the giant axe just in the nick of time. At the same time, Jian Chen's body suddenly turned as his light wind sword began to emit an amazing amount of sword chi and flew at the battle axe like a viper. Tian Xiong had a serious look on his face as he observed the light wind sword. He had already experienced the lightning quick draw of Jian Chen's sword once before and was thus prepared against it this time. Upon seeing the protective shield of the Earth Saint Force wrapping up around his own upper body, he tilted his head and moved to the side while bringing his battle axe around to swing at Jian Chen from a different angle. The first blow had looked to be extremely dangerous, but Tian Xiong had actually held back his strength. Otherwise, he wouldn't have been able to draw back his weapon and change its trajectory so easily. Jian Chen snorted as he looked at the next attack from Tian Xiong with disdain. His eyes betrayed the killing intent in them as he changed the path of his stab so that it would follow Tian Xiong movements. Even more amazing was that the speed had even multiplied 3 times over. Seeing the change in momentum of the sword, Tian Xiong face turned pale with shock. In a moment, he had realized that he wouldn't be able to shake off the sword. The incredibly sharp point of the light wind sword met against the Earth Saint Force armor around his body. It only momentarily stopped before the defense, well known for being the strongest defensive attribute, was instantly shattered. In an instant, the light wind sword regained its lost momentum and flew at his throat, shaving away his defenses like a hot knife through butter. Suddenly, just as Tian Xiong was on the verge of death, a bent-shaped sword dropped down heavily on the light wind sword, instantly forcing the path of it to deviate from its original target. A few strands of hair floated gently in the air as people saw that a part of Tian Xiong long beard had been cut, but that was a small price to pay for his life. Tian Xiong forehead was full of sweat now. If it were not for that sword, he wouldn't have been able to stand there alive and breathing. Not only was Jian Chen's sword extremely fast, but it was extremely agile to a degree that Tian Xiong had not expected. Then the other 7 had finally caught a good chance to kill Jian Chen. Joining together at once to kill him, 8 saint weapons all flew toward Jian Chen all at the same time and all from different angles. The large amount of saint force acted almost as if it was a web of pressure that shackled Jian Chen within and sealed off any possible way of escape. With a snort, Jian Chen shook his arm that held the light wind sword and instantly struck out with it toward the direction Tian Xiong was at. In the perspective of the other 7 who were attacking him, it was as if he disappeared from their vision. Against Jian Chen's entire strength, the opposition of great saint masters could only defend themselves against 3 sword strokes with confidence. After his light wind sword had pressured them to retreat backward, Jian Chen made another movement and instantly propelled himself forward toward Tian Xiong like a bullet. Following the sound of air being displaced, Jian Chen's body catapulted forward as 6 saint weapons tried to attack him from behind while another saint weapon tried to cut into Jian Chen's shoulder. After being saved from a critical moment, Tian Xiong did not think he would be in danger again so soon. His face couldn't help but grow startled once more as he realized that the light wind sword was traveling toward his throat again. Immediately bringing up his battle axe to defend himself, the large battle axe tried to shield the upper half of his body from the sword. The next moment, Tian Xiong suddenly felt the protective barrier created from his saint force breaking once more. Clenching his giant battle axe in this moment of crisis as his only reaction, Tian Xiong could only feel a sharp stinging sensation in his throat. Jian Chen had gotten around him and pierced through Tian Xiong throat from behind. Seeing the sight of his own blood splashed on the sword through his neck, Tian Xiong suddenly grew sluggish as though he was going into shock from what he was seeing. Chapter 226. Deterrence. Tian Xiong had a look of utter shock on his face. Not even in his wildest of dreams could he imagine that the weak Aunt Jian Chen from 1 year ago would go through such a drastic change in strength. An even more inconceivable thing was to think about himself dying at the hands of Jian Chen. Originally, When he had first heard about how a youth named Jian Chen had eradicated the Zhou clan, Tianxiong Lai's first thought was of the youth that had murdered his son Tianxiong Kong from 1 year ago. He had thought that Jian Chen had gotten help killing the Zhou clan. But even thinking about how Jian Chen could kill the Zhou clan who was weaker than the Tianxiong clan was still inconceivable to Tianxiong Lai. Yet this still wasn't enough to worry him because the Tianxiong clan's strength was far higher. If he were to invite a few strong people to unite with him, then he would be a paragon of power within Wake City. Tianxiong Lai invited a few good friends and even united with 2 other men of considerable power in different clans to deal with the help that Jian Chen would bring, or at the very least that he ensure wouldn't run away. After all, Jian Chen hadn't even been able to handle a few blows from him a year ago, so today was the day that Tianxiong Lai had thought he would finally avenge his son's death. It was really unbelievable to see such a drastic transformation of Jian Chen when compared to the Jian Chen of the past who could only ambush people and run away due to his weak strength. In the time span of a single year, Jian Chen's new strength had turned the heavens on its head and transformed the weakling into a strong expert capable of killing an entire clan or 2. Tianxiong Lai's head had instantly come up with these thoughts, but even at that moment, he had felt that whatever was happening right in front of his eyes was nothing more than a dream. He had been a great Saint Master, his brother was a great Saint Master, and even the other 7 he was with were all great Saint Masters, but they weren't even able to kill or even capture Jian Chen. How could this be anything but a nightmare? The life force within his body was already beginning to spill out as Tianxiong Lai remained speechless. Slowly, his unwilling face began to fall toward the ground. Tianxiong Daoyun and the other 7 men all stared at the collapsed Tianxiong Lai with a looks of utter disbelief. Even the 100 clansmen and guards surrounding the fight all looked slowly at Jian Chen before looking back to Tianxiong Lai without a single word. The leader of Wake City's number 1 clan, a great Saint Master with an Earth attribute Saint Force, Tianxiong Lai, had fallen. Big brother. Suddenly, a cry of anguish came out from Tianxiong Daoyun. With a face full of grief, he swung into action and charged at Jian Chen ready to slice him in 2. Seeing the explosive reaction from him, Jian Chen's eyes narrowed. The light wind sword became a flurry of sword illusions as it struck at Tianxiong Daoyun's sword. When the 2 made contact, another metallic ring could be heard as a large amount of energy pulsated and shook the air as it flew away from the 2 weapons. Then, with a flick of his wrist, Jian Chen shook off the vibrations running through his light wind sword and struck toward Tianxiong Daoyun's throat. Seeing the light wind sword come straight at him, Tianxiong Daoyun resisted the numb feeling in his arm and the shaking sword he was holding and immediately lifted the sword up. Jian Chen's sword was so fast that if Daoyun was given any more time to prepare, he might have been able to defend himself against 1 or 2 strokes. However, he only had enough time to bring up his sword. He wasn't able to do anything else but defend. As Tianxiong Daoyun brought up his sword, the light wind sword was already nearly in front of him. At this, the light wind sword began to emit a violet and azure glow. The 2 glows were rather faint, but with the way they glowed on the tip of the sword like a candle at night, it was rather eye-catching. Just as the tip of the light wind sword made contact with the broadside of Tianxiong Daoyun's sword, so too did the faint azure and violet glows. As soon as the glows touched the thick sword, they slowly began to melt the weapon and cracks formed. Instantly the light wind sword pierced through the cracks. In front of the azure and violet glows, Tianxiong Daoyun's sword was like a piece of tofu. Pieces. The sharp tip of the light wind sword had smashed through the rest of the sword much to the extreme shock of Tianxiong Daoyun and penetrated through his throat. Seeing how Jian Chen's light wind sword had managed to find its way to Tianxiong Daoyun's throat, the remaining 7 people immediately went still with their eyes and jaws wide open. Even more so they stared rigidly at the broken remnants of Tianxiong Daoyun's sword with thunderstruck expressions. The fact that Jian Chen had enough strength to fight against 9 great Saint Masters had already shocked them majorly, but now that they saw Jian Chen's spear through a great Saint Mater's saint weapon, they were inconsolable at this point. In the case that a saint weapon was given saint force, then it would grow even firmer and improve in strength along with its owner. If a saint weapon were used to fight against another person of the same level, then no matter how long or how much the 2 would fight, neither saint weapon would have even a scratch. If one wanted to scratch a saint weapon, especially the saint weapon of a great saint master, even an earth saint master wouldn't be able to do it with ease. However, Jian Chen had done it with no difficulty, spearing it straight through to kill the great saint master holding it without breaking a sweat. With a feat like this, the 7 great saint masters couldn't help but suspect that Jian Chen was secretly an expert at the heaven saint master level. Tianxiong Daoyun's face was filled with shock as he looked at the sword in his throat. As his body began to shut down and resign itself to death, Tianxiong Daoyun couldn't help but think to himself one last spiraling question. Just how did Jian Chen stab through his saint weapon? Even though the question was on his mind, with a sword through his throat, Tianxiong Daoyun couldn't ask it. In the end, he could only think about the question to himself as he slowly fell to the ground with his eyes staring vacantly up toward the sky, never to close again. Afterward, Jian Chen turned to look at the other 7 with a strong amount of pure, unhidden killing intent. The light wind sword began to glow silver as it pumped out even more sword chi, as if responding to Jian Chen's killing aura. The other 7 men could clearly sense Jian Chen's intent on killing them with pale faces. If Jian Chen was only just able to kill Tianxiong Lai, they would be shocked, but the method on how he did it had completely terrified them to a dizzying amount. Chapter 227. Submission. The other 7 men with pale faces could clearly sense Jian Chen's intent on killing them. If Jian Chen was only just able to kill Tianxiong Lai, they would be shocked, but the method on how he did it had completely terrified them to a dizzying amount. When Jian Chen had so easily stabbed through Tianxiong Daoyun's saint weapon, it had demonstrated that if he wanted, Jian Chen could easily kill the 7 great saint masters with as much ease as stepping on an ant. Although a saint weapon was a man's weapon, it also symbolized their connection with their life. If their saint weapon broke, then they would die. Even if they were unfortunate enough to live, they would be no better than a cripple. Right in front of their eyes was solid proof that Jian Chen could easily destroy their saint weapons without trouble. Just thinking about how they were walking the narrow line between life or death had truly shocked them deep to their core. By now, the 7 of them had lost their fighting spirit and could only look at Jian Chen with a different expression than before, but still mixed onto their faces was a great deal of fear. "Stop. Fellow brother, please stay your hand." Seeing how Jian Chen was staring at them with a look full of malice, one of the elders hurriedly called out to him while reabsorbing his saint weapon into his body as if showing his unwillingness to be Jian Chen's enemy. Then Jian Chen snorted, "Be lenient to you? What a funny thing to hear. Just a moment ago I had told you to not get involved, but you ended up involving yourself anyways, so don't blame me." Jian Chen's words had caused the 7 to look afraid for a moment before the elder who had spoken up before said once more, "Junior, this is nothing more than a misunderstanding. We aren't from the Tianxiong clan and we're only invited by them. Today if you let us go, we will not be able to thank you enough." "That's right, Junior. If you let us go today, we will truly thank you from the bottom of our hearts." The other elders spoke quickly. At this critical juncture that would decide their life, both elders had already thrown away their high noble status for a better chance of survival. Jian Chen's method of killing Tianxiong Daoyun had already made their defenses absolutely useless. In their eyes, just protecting their lives today would be a higher priority than anything else. Plus, more importantly, they had no grievances or hatred with Jian Chen. It was only because Tianxiong Lai had invited them that they were involved in this matter. Jian Chen continued to stare at the 7 men with a flashing eye brightly. For a moment he was silent, but then a small smile appeared on his face. "So it's like that? Then I'll give you a chance to live." Upon hearing that, the 7 great saint masters' eyes sparkled. Despite 5 of the 7 not speaking up to protect themselves, they all had the same strong desire to live. Seeing the strong desire to live, Jian Chen's mouth began to grow wider as he spoke. "There is one condition to your survival. From today on out, you will surrender and pay your allegiance to me." The 7 men's faces suddenly started for a moment with an unsightly look. Each one went silent as an intense struggle began to happen within themselves. Knowing how the 7 weren't able to decide, Jian Chen's face went cold for a moment, but inside he was laughing. When he had used the azure and violet sword chi to kill Tianxiong Daoyun, It was quite excessive, but he had already planned it all out. His goal was simple: by use of an overpowering amount of force, he would force the 7 into submission and eventually use that power to expand his flame mercenaries. Of course, if they continued to be pig-headed and refused to surrender, then Jianchen would kill them without hesitation. Seeing the 7 men in front of him, Jianchen knew that his plan was already halfway there. For now, he only had to see what the 7 would decide on. Jianchen understood the strike while the iron is hot ideology, so immediately he said, "I know you are all influential figures of Wake City with a large amount of power and face. Do not think that I am trying to humiliate you by trying to have you submit to me. It's actually the opposite. If you submit to me, then I, Jianchen, will guarantee that your achievements in the future will be far better than your current ones. Your achievements will even soar to a previously unattainable height instead of being limited to such a small and withdrawn city like Wake City. Do not doubt my abilities." All the men suddenly looked up as if they all felt a mutual feeling between them. Although they all thought Jianchen to be too young, his strength was so strong that they felt as if they had been left behind in the dust. This display of strength had really proved that Jianchen's identity was not simple at all. Of course, there were even a few people within their group that were convinced that Jianchen belonged to an extremely powerful clan. With that, the 7 men couldn't help but think that being allied with Jianchen would not be a bad thing. In fact, it would be a tremendously big opportunity for them to go along with Jianchen, since they wouldn't know for themselves if they would truly reach a new height of power. "Fine, I am Weiss, the representative of the Door clan. The Door clan agrees to follow you. From today on out, my men are yours to supervise." The first elder, who had spoken previously, pledged. Jianchen couldn't help but have a happy smile on his face. "I am Kai, heir of the Kai clan. From today on, my clan is yours to dispatch." The second elder spoke. Jianchen's smile grew even wider. He hadn't thought that these 2 elders were the representatives of the Kai and Door clan. These 2 clans were very powerful clans that, while not on the same level as the Tianxiong clan or Zhou clan in Wake City, Jianchen had heard about before. "What about you 5? Jianchen turned to the 5 middle-aged men. The great Saint Masters could be considered to be a decent leveled warrior on the Tianyuan continent. So when it came to these type of people, he didn't wish for them to be killed, since aside from Ming Dong and him, the flame mercenaries had no one else. If he wanted the flame mercenaries to expand, then he would need to gather as many strong people as possible. "Fine, I am willing to follow you, but I cannot guarantee if my fellow brothers will do the same." After that, the remaining 5 men all consented to follow Jianchen as their leader. From far away, the 100 guards of the Tianxiong clan looked at Jianchen with wide eyes as if they were watching a drama. Every man had gone silent with shock as they watched 7 of Wake City's famous figures who had initially been invited by Tianxiong Lai to fight Jianchen all follow him. They could never believe that these 7 would be subservient to the one man who had killed Tianxiong Lai. Despite it all happening right in front of him, the 100 guards still couldn't believe their eyes. You're tuning in to the Passion Pages YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.